Greetings, humans. You have entered the Command Zone, your destination for all aspects of Elder Dragon Highlander. Enjoy your stay.
Legends never die when the world is calling you. Can you hear them screaming out your name? Legends never die.
I only know that part of the song.
Nice. Good enough. Legends do indeed never die.
Because they go to the command zone and then they come back.
Yeah, fans of League of Legends would have heard that at Worlds a few years ago. But hey, how's it going, everyone? You are watching / listening to the Command Zone podcast. It's that time, and by that time, it's the first time it's ever happened. Commander Legends, a full-on set dedicated to the Commander format that's draftable, is here, and there are 70-plus new Legends to talk about.
Yeah, it's a lot. Usually we've got like 15 to 20 in a set. 70 is unprecedented. We're going to end up doing a bunch of extra.
Yeah.
We're going to split everything up because we can't just do like all the legends because that's going to be like 5 hours long. And then there's partner legends. There's all kinds of stuff. By the way, he's Jimmy Wong.
Oh, yes.
I'm Josh Lee Kwai.
Wait.
How's it? We are watching / listening to the Command Zone podcast. This is going to be part 1 of the solo legends. So these are the legendary creatures who can be your commander but do not have partner.
Yes.
That's going to be a 2-part series. Then we're going to do at least 2 parts for the partners. Then we'll do all the cards that are in the 99, and then we'll probably do a bunch of other stuff because the set is bonkers. But before we get into it, we got to take a quick break. I almost said break.
No, a quick moment.
A quick moment and talk about our sponsors.
Yes.
CardKingdom.com/Command Zone.
Look, right now might not be the safest time to draft Commander Legends in a store. A lot of stores are closed down, but that doesn't mean that you can't pick up booster packs if you're in the US. That doesn't mean you can't pick up all the amazing singles from this set because they will affect the format for sure. There are lots of really interesting cards and a lot of powerful, impactful ones. So if you use that affiliate link, you are purchasing every single Magic card that you need from Commander Legends, from any sets that are coming up, and you're also supporting the show at the same time. It's super simple. All you do is type in cardkingdom.com/Command Zone, and blammo, you are there.
Yeah, you're going to want a lot of these cards. To be clear, they're also available in not the U.S.
Yeah, the only sealed product is the only sort of thing that Card Kingdom can't send outside.
Yeah, but they're still doing pre-orders for all the singles. Mm-hmm. There are a ton of singles that you're going to want from this set. There's some pretty bonkers stuff here.
Yeah.
Yeah, cardkingdom.com/Command Zone. You're going to buy that stuff anyway. May as well just use the affiliate link when you do to simultaneously support game nights, extra turns, this podcast, all of our content. And then when you get your hands on those cards, you want to protect them. You want to keep them safe. There's no better way to do it than by using Ultra Pro product. They are the ones that Jimmy and I personally trust with our own collections, our own decks, all sleeved up in Ultra Pro Eclipse sleeves. In fact, I'm transferring over to the Pro Gloss Eclipse sleeves for a lot of my decks now, just because that shuffle feel and the look of the cards just cannot be beat. And I know that my cards are going to be very, very safe when I've got them in Ultra Pro products.
Not just that, they're amazing sponsors, and they're giving us a ton of Commander Legends stuff. We're still figuring out how we're going to give it away, but keep tuned into all of our Commander Legends episodes, and there is a good chance that you could win some awesome swag from the set.
Yeah, Ultra Pro always giving us stuff to give away. So Commander Legends is a pretty special time. We're going to give away more stuff than normal. And the final way to support all of our content is directly if you go to patreon.com/Command Zone. There's all kinds of cool perks like talking with Jimmy and I in our Discord each and every day. You get to watch game nights earlier than the general public. You get to watch extra turns earlier than the general public. Also, game nights and extra turns are ad-free when you see them early. And spoiler alert, we've got a game nights episode based around the Commander Legends stuff and an extra turns episode based around the Commander Legends stuff.
Whoa!
So there's a lot to look forward to and a lot of perks to be cashed in for the patrons. And the final thing that the benefit that the patrons get is we shout out one lucky patron every single episode.
And this episode is dedicated to Verita Rizel. Rizel.
Verita, you rock.
You do rock.
Sorry, we probably didn't get your name right even once in there.
We tried, though.
We did our best.
Yeah, as long as we try.
All right, Commander Legends, Solo Legends, Part 1.
This is like a new sequel trilogy.
It's just like confused. It's like it's like there's like 4 colons in there.
Yeah. So again, we're going to be covering this over a lot of episodes, and there are also Commander precons and new cards as well. So what we're going to do are 2 episodes, 16 creatures each for the non-partner legendary creatures as Commander. This is the first one. And then there's going to be 2 episodes for the partner legendary creatures as Commander, and there are 38 of those, so we'll split that in half. And then there's going to be cards in the 99, so cards that are not legendary creatures, but you can put into decks. And we might even do something about Commander Legends Draft. We'll see.
Okay, lots to come. So we better get started.
Yes. Quick note, because of the way that this was split up, I think due to balancing in the draft, it turns out that there are 2 commanders in every single color pairing, and only red, white, and green, blue actually have 3 because of the precons. And then there's 1 commander for each 3-color shard or wedge. So we're going to break it down sort of that way as we go through it. And of course, there'll be timestamps as well if you want to just sort of look, I want to see the Azorius commanders, or I want to see the black-green ones.
Yeah,
so
in the more info box, hopefully we remember to actually do this. There should be time code stamps for, like, if you just want to find a certain commander, you can jump to that time code.
Yep.
Okay, what are we starting with?
We are starting with white and blue. So again, there are 2 commanders in every single of the color pairings, and white and blue starts off with Kangee, Sky Warden, or Kangee. I just think of the edible
Kangee is the soup. Yeah, I was like, I really like Kangee.
Yeah.
That's not how you spell it.
This is due for a Kangee Agashira?
Kangee?
You want the nummy? Yeah, sure.
Sure.
Either way, it's 3 a white and a blue for a 3/3 legendary creature bird wizard with flying and vigilance. Whenever Kangee, Sky Warden attacks, attacking creatures with flying get +2/+0 until end of turn, and whenever Kangee blocks, blocking creatures with flying get +0/+2 until end of turn.
When you block, you get toughness, and when you attack, you get power if you're flying tribal.
Yeah, this has actually been something that Wizards has supported a lot more recently, most notably with Ineaz, the Gale Force, which was in Jumpstart, which was another interesting sort of blue-white version of making, whenever 3 or more creatures you control with flying attack, each player gains control of a non-land permanent of your choice controlled by a player to their right. But flying tribal is no new thing. There's lots of cards that sort of support this archetype.
Yeah, it's not super exciting, right?
Yeah.
You kind of search gather for things that fly and care about flying, and then you put a bunch of those in. I mean, they've been doing this a lot. Menace tribal, Menace tribal,
right.
Death Touch tribal, Trample tribal. So it seems like at some point somebody at Wizards went, you know what? We can do keyword tribal. And they've started to build that slowly rather than do it all at once, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. Kangee's been around, by the way. Airy Keeper was the original version of Kangee. And then we'll just list off a few cards. You'll see them on the screen. Watcher of the Spheres is helping you cast cheaper flying creatures. They get +1/+1. I mean, you can buff the Watcher. Animal Sanctuary is a new card that cares about birds because Kangee is a big old bird. Soul Catcher's Airy, Empyrean Angel, Emeria Angel. Basically, there's lots of stuff out there to make flying tribal work. I actually like this. I think it's cool that, I think for a new player, if you gave them a flying tribal deck, they could figure it out. That's a great intro into the format. They're probably going to knock a couple players out.
Yep.
So that's great. I'm fine with this.
I recently learned from game nights that flying is still good in Commander.
Still good. Always good.
Very often you're like, oh crap, thing has flying? Oh, I'm going to die to that. So if your whole deck's flying, that seems decent.
Goodbye, Planeswalker.
All right, let's talk about the next card.
Yes.
All right.
The second blue-white entry.
It is Kwain, Itinerant Meddler. Itinerant?
Itinerant.
Okay.
He's got an itinerary, maybe.
Yeah, he's late for a very important
late.
thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It is white and a blue for a 1/3 legendary rabbit wizard.
Hey.
It is definitely the rabbit from Alice in Wonderland.
I'm thinking this might be a card that's from Strixhaven because it's very magical, and I could totally see rabbits running around Strixhaven.
All right, so it's 2 mana, white and a blue for a 1/3, but you can tap it, and each player may draw a card. Then each player who drew a card this way gains 1 life. So you may draw a card. I don't know who's going to say no to that. But if you say yes and draw the card, then you will also gain 1 life.
This also kind of seems like a new-ish tribe that they've been supporting for a long time, which is like, let's give everyone the ability to draw and make the game a little smoother. This is a 2-mana card, so this is coming out really early as a Howling Moon might. But you have control. Howling Mine. Howling Cat.
You're thinking of Cameo of the Crescent Moon.
Cameo of the Crescent Moon, yeah.
We're going to talk about it in a second, yeah.
Yeah, so there are a lot of cards that do this. Temple Bell, right? You can do it. In this case, people can choose whether or not they want to draw a card, but you're right. Who would ever say no to that?
Yeah. Especially if you got Nekazar or something out, maybe, but different colors, obviously, except my Nekazar deck. Anyway. Yeah, so this is probably... you could go in the group hug direction. Everybody's drawing a lot of cards type of cards.
Yeah, there's like Tomorrow, Azami's Familiar, which is a card that lets you scry 3 essentially every time you're about to draw a card. Alhamrat's Archive and Teferi's Ageless Insight both have this replacement effect, which is if you would draw a card except for the first one we draw on each of your draw steps, draw 2 cards instead.
So you tap Kwain and you say, everybody else gets 1, but I get 2.
Yeah, however, you don't gain a life because the draw card is replacing the full-on effect.
Oh, you didn't draw a card
yeah.
this way. You drew it another way.
Yeah.
Oh, darn. I lose one.
Shucks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. This, I think, it's just an interesting card.
This next card is perfect with it.
It is quite perfect with it. Can you name me a card in white, Josh, that cares about other players drawing cards for your benefit?
Mothering Tithe. That's great. You're just like, everybody draw a card. By the way, can I have 3 treasure? Thank you.
Yeah, that seems really powerful. I think if you just go this direction for like big mana Azorius, or you can put Kwain into other decks, obviously. I think he's great in a Feldergriff deck. He's pretty good in a Knaos and Tiro deck, just because you're trying to get this
general
effect.
Group huggy type stuff.
And then if you want to get really mean with it,
I put down the 2 mean cards.
You're going to just talk about them real fast.
So Narset, Parter of Veils, which is a planeswalker that has a static ability. Each opponent can't draw more than 1 card each turn.
I thought Leovold was banned.
Yeah. It's not amazing with Kwain, right? Because if you do it on your turn, they're all going to draw. They haven't probably drawn a card yet this turn. Right. But what you can do is deny a certain specific player the card because you activate it on their turn with Narset out, and you can use that for your politics, right? Like, I've got Narset out. It's not going to be that bad. But if you're mean to me, then I'll just activate Kwain on your turn after you've drawn and everybody else will draw, but you won't. Same thing you can do with the next card, which is Spirit of the Labyrinth.
Yeah, each player can't draw more than 1 card each turn. This does actually just shut down a lot of decks that want to draw a bunch of cards.
And this is the same thing because you activate Kwain on somebody else's turn, so you haven't drawn a card yet this turn. They don't draw any cards. Everybody else gets 1. Politics ensue. Also, this is a deck that's in blue. You could have Windfall in the deck and things like that. So just happen to have Narset out and be like, oops, I'll do the Leovold thing. Nobody has. I'll do the Kyle Hill thing. Nobody has any cards in hand anymore.
Jeez, it's just the Kyle Hill thing. Leovold doesn't exist. It was replaced by Kyle Hill.
The good old days.
Yeah. So Kwain, Itinerant Meddler, definitely is going to be meddling a lot. I don't see myself building a deck around this, but I could see this slotting into a few different places.
Yeah, I wish it didn't say May, because now I can't even put it into my Nekasar deck.
That's true. I'm just going to be like, I don't want... Well, here's the thing. If it's only 1 Nekasar effect, they gain the life.
They're like,
and they lose
I break even, I'll draw.
And you're like, got him. Next turn I will get you, I swear. All right, moving on, we're going to talk about how white and blue pair up with other colors. In this case, red. So we have our Jeskai commander in Gnostro, Voice of the Crags, or Crags in this case. It's 1 in Jeskai, so 1 blue, red, and white for a 3/3 legendary creature, Chimera. And you can tap it to choose 1, and X is the number of spells you cast this turn. So you can either tap the Chimera to scry X, or Gnostro deals X damage to target creature, or you gain X life. Storm seems to apply to a card that cares about casting a lot of spells.
It's funny because they built it for Storm ostensibly, but it doesn't have a real great Storm payoff.
Like a win condition, basically.
Like if you storm off, then you kill a creature. You gain a bunch of life.
Yeah.
You scry a bunch. You don't even draw. So I kind of like that, actually, because Storm is pretty powerful and also the type of mechanic that's kind of boring to play against because they either kill you or they do nothing.
Yeah.
This makes it so that Storms may be a little bit, quote-unquote, more fun or enjoyable for your opponents in that you storm a little and then... Who am I kidding? You're going to storm a lot, and then you're just going to win with a different card, like,
any of the
Goblin Warrens or whatever, the Mill one or something else, or probably Aetherflux Reservoir, because that's what everyone storms off and wins with. So
I think with Gnostro, maybe you're just going spells matter. You're right. You're going to play this in the deck. Let's say you have an Artifacts Matters deck, and you have an Urza in your deck. And you can tap your artifacts to add a bunch of mana. So now you're casting a bunch of stuff. You're getting a ton of value off of Gnostro. Gnostro seems more like a supportive character as a commander, as opposed to sort of like, do storm with this.
Sure. Are people going to put Urza into their Gnostro deck?
I mean, no. But maybe you put Kaza Royal Chaser and go for a full wizard deck. But then why just have a wizard as your commander? Elsha of the Infinite, these two seem like a pair made in heaven, because Elsha can cast cards off the top of your library. And
so with some top deck manipulation, you can really go through a bunch of,
Kaikar Wind's Fury is another one of those decks that people do build to be Storm. But again, if you're just casting 3-4 spells a turn, I think Gnostro is worth it. I think maybe even if you're casting 2 spells a turn, it's worth it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kaikar and Elsha are just going to be strictly better Storm commanders because they give you the pieces you need for Storm, which is cards and or mana. This just pays you off for Storm, but usually when you're storming, you're cycling through a lot of your deck, and so you don't really need a payoff, and these aren't even great payoffs. I mean, I think you could probably build this in sort of a more fair/fun way where you're taking advantage of casting...
cantrips, small things.
Yeah, you're not going to cast, your goal's not really to cast like 20 spells in turn, but like 3 or 4, and then you're going to take weird advantage of like that ability to deal damage to target creatures. So maybe you have like Brash Taunter in your deck.
There you go. Yeah, Brash Taunter is a new card from M21. It's a 5-mana indestructible 1/1. When it's dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target opponent. So there's kind of a win condition or a hurt people a lot condition, right?
Yeah, you got to set up your combo and then still storm off before it actually does anything. But as like just value, like, hey, I cast 3 cards this turn, boom, Brash Taunter, deal 3 to you.
Yeah.
Because Gnostro is kind of a Tim in some ways, right? It can't hit players, but it can hit creatures. So
right. So Repercussion then gets better because now you can deal damage to a creature, and then that creature deals that much damage to its controller.
And the normal stuff we talk about with Tims all the time, like Death Touch, give it Death Touch. Okay, now it can just kill creatures every time you tap it. Untap it. Untappers will be good. Fate Stitchers and things like that, right?
Not to mention if you can, if you unearth the Fate Stitcher, that counts as casting a spell, right? Oh, no, that's activating ability.
Yeah.
Right. Well, how about this? How about Vadrok, Apex of Thunder? This is a card that can mutate onto Gnostro. So maybe put Gnostro in the deck, and then when it mutates, you can cast a non-creature card with CMC 3 or less from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. So boom.
Oh, boom, Storm.
It's more like a couple of raindrops. It's not like a full-on storm yet, but maybe we're getting there. For me, I think like Gnostro and the whole like Repercussion route is so risky. If the other opponent just has a sack outlet, and then you're like, all right, gonna Gnostro your creature for 20 damage, and they're just like, I will sacrifice it in response. Bye-bye.
Well, sure, but I mean, you still are killing the creature. I mean, Repercussion doesn't obviously help you there, but like, if what you want to do is kill creatures, I mean...
I like Brash Taunter a lot, though. I think that card is actually a great friend of Gnostro. But the deck is hard because you kind of have to build it to be spells matter. But if you don't want to build Storm, then you're just kind of stuck with, like what we said, the sort of cantrippy, small mana spells, and it's whatever.
Yeah. So... I mean, not super, super exciting, but I think there's maybe some interesting stuff you can do with it. It is in the Storm colors, so, you know. Yeah, all right.
Now, there is a card that's coming up right now that is exciting. In fact, it's so exciting, it's absurd.
It's absurding.
It's absurding. It's, this might be, I don't know, do you think this is the most powerful commander?
It's up there. Yeah, I don't know if it's the most, but it's up there. It's Amareth the Lustrous. 3 and Bant. So 3 green, white, blue, 6 mana total for a 6/6 flying legendary dragon. Whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, look at the top card of your library. If it shares a card type with that permanent, you may reveal that card and put it into your hand. So any permanent, this includes lands, right? When you play a land, you reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, it goes into your hand.
Hey, how about you fetch land?
Yeah, that's 2 chances to get a land. Obviously, top deck manipulation is going to be the order of the day for Amareth.
Yeah, play a Brainstorm, play a Scroll Rack.
We know Scroll Rack is being reprinted in this set.
How about Cultivate? What about any ramp spell? You're going to get more value off of this. Typically, when you cast a 6 CMC commander and you draw Cultivate, you're like, well, I don't really need it. But in this case, if it's going to start cycling you through your deck and you have ways to manipulate the top of your deck, holy moly. Not to mention there's so many green cards now, like the new Vivian, that let you look at the top card of your library, and Vizier of the Menagerie and stuff. So you're going to know how to sequence stuff up.
Yeah, so like Explosive Vegetation, put 2 lands into play, gets you 2 looks at the top card of your library. Does it reveal the card, and if it's not, what happens to it? If it shares a card type with that permanent, you reveal that card. Oh, so it'll be the same. Oh, so Explosive Vegetation maybe not as good, unless you are setting up the top of your library, because you'd reveal the top card if it's not a land. Then you reveal it with the second trigger too, the same card, right?
I mean, I think there's so many different ways you could build this commander.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
I have a card up on my phone that made Josh go, oh, man. And we've already talked about it. But yeah, right, there's so many ways.
It's already good, like one of the best cards of the format. But
there's so many ways you can build this.
Because it doesn't say non-token permanent. It just says another permanent.
Another permanent. So if you
let's
play
say what the card is.
Smothering Tithe, and you're having Artifacts Matters deck.
Oh, boy.
Every single time you get a treasure, reveal the top card of your library. If it's an artifact, draw it.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I think you could go lands matter with this, and that way you're stacking lands on top of your library, you're getting a bunch of landfall triggers, you want to be playing your Azusas and stuff.
And then that's allowing you to play extra. Yeah, so you probably want like 45 lands in the deck too, just to up your chance of hitting lands. All your cards let you play more lands, and then you just win with landfall triggers. Another lands matter deck, but this one in Bant, which was not something we've really seen.
Yeah, I think this would be an amazing Enchantress commander, because enchantments are already in the end of the battlefield. They're a permanent, you can flip the top card of your library. And most of the Enchantress cards like Tuvasa and Estrid, they just want you to play more enchantments and you draw cards off of them. Yippee.
Yeah, Seems very, very powerful.
Yeah, you can go the flicker route and play a rune of the Hidden Realm in the deck like this.
So you flicker it, and that's entering the battlefield, and then you look at the top card, and is it a creature? Yep.
You have like now Emil the Blessed, Eldrazi Displacer, Soul Herder, Thassa Deep Dwelling.
Blinky stuff.
All the blinky stuff. One card I actually was really excited about was Charming Prince. It's 1 in the white for a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, you can scry 2, gain 3 life, or exile another target creature you own, and you return to the battlefield under your control at the beginning of the next end step. So this is one of those few cards where it comes in, triggers Amareth, flickers a creature, triggers Amareth again. So you get that double value. Brewlezer Exarch is an old favorite of mine. This actually just draws you any creature card in your deck. You pay it for 6 mana, and you can search your library for a creature card, reveal it, shuffle your library, and put that card on top of it. You play it, and you stack the triggers so that Brewlezer Exarch goes off first. Put anything you want. Amareth will reveal it because it's a creature with Brewlezer Exarch, and you put it in your hand.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah. Glen Elendra also, when it comes back, does another trigger.
Yeah, so all the persist, everything
like that. Do you need more value off of it? Sure. Mole Drifter, you get a creature in the battlefield with Evoke. Again, I don't know if Bant needs the help. They just got Chulane last year and Arquettes, the Strategist, which are both just nuts with this card.
Well, I mean, if you're running those as your commander, this is in the 99, which is just like another value card. And it's probably on the level of like a Panharmonicon in those decks anyway, right?
Yeah.
Now, when it's your commander, it's kind of a different thing. But, you know, it's going to be interesting to see. I think there are going to be many ways to just kind of draw out your deck or most of your deck if you feel like it, especially once you have top deck manipulation. So definitely a powerful card.
Yeah, it's definitely up there. It is 6 mana, but again, in these colors, you should have no problem getting there.
All right. On to the next one, which is decidedly quite a bit less powerful.
Yeah, but cool. I'm sure our Vorthos players appreciate this because this is the last of the Angel Sisters.
Oh, I did not know that.
It's Liesa, Shroud of Dusk, 2 white, and black for a legendary creature Angel, 5/5. Rather than pay 2 for each previous time you've cast this spell from the command zone this game, pay 2 life that many times. It's got flying and lifelink, and whenever a player casts a spell, they lose 2 life.
So you play life rather than commander tax.
Yeah, which is interesting because you actually don't have a choice. You have to do it each time. So it's still a 5 mana commander. If it dies once, it's 5 mana and 1 Phyrexian mana, essentially, or 2 life. However, it's got this whenever a player casts a spell, so yourself included, they lose 2 life. This is like
does
Death
have
and
lifelink,
Taxes.
so it gives you back the life that you've lost. That's what it's supposed to do anyway. And you're in black-white, so you can lean into the life gain theme a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably what you want to do because everybody else is going to cast spells, take 2 every time, and you're going to kind of be able to gain that life back, whereas hopefully they won't.
Not to mention, if they remove it, too bad. It's coming back out for the exact same mana cost. And
it doesn't matter that much to you if you got life gain, right? So it's like, whatever. 4 life, sure.
Yeah, this doesn't seem like a deck that makes you a lot of friends. I've played against console of allocation decks, which basically do the same thing, except you're gaining some life whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell. People don't like you when you play that deck. And I don't know if people will love you when you play Liesa either.
For the record, I like Camball decks because they make games fast. Yeah. And it's like, whatever, everyone's taking damage. Somebody's going to win eventually, but it's going to, yeah.
Speaking of paying life, though, Font of Agony is a Josh Lee Kwai favorite. Every time you recast Liesa, you get some blood counters.
Good card if you're paying life a lot.
Yeah, Villas, Broker of Blood. Whenever you lose life, how many ways can black and white make Villas better? Turns out
you can pay life to give creatures -1/-1 until end of turn, and then whenever you lose life, you draw that many cards. So if you cast Liesa, if you cast her, for the 3rd time, you're just going to draw 4 cards.
Yeah.
That's pretty sweet.
Good, yeah.
And then every time you cast a spell, you lose 2 life, so you draw more cards.
Oh, that's true. That's right. You could
Villas is awesome.
I feel like you could just go off at that point.
Yeah, probably.
Polluted Bonds, whenever a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, that player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So I think you just stack the deck with a bunch of these sort of Death and Taxes, Aristocrats type stuff. You're going to be gaining a ton of life. You've got the whole Ghost Council to help you out in this regard. And then you win the game that way. And then you occasionally hit them for 5 in the air,
Oh, yeah, I like Children of Corliss in this deck because it is a white mana for a 1/1, but you sack it and you gain life equal to the life you've lost this turn. So in a deck that's going to lose a bunch of life on purpose, seems like a good idea to just...
all the Rebel Tutors and get it out.
There you go. I don't know if that's worth it.
I think that's actually a deck that was running around for a little bit in more serious formats. Anyway, yeah, Liesa seems interesting. Not, nuts, but
an interesting way to use life gain, though. It's sort of indirectly, which I kind of like, rather than them just going down the same life gain routes that they have.
And I kind of like getting around commander attacks, too, because we've talked about how after you've lost your commander twice, you're just never going to cast it again.
Right.
So,
all right, the next one is Thalisse? Khaleesi?
It's Khaleesi. It's Thalisse.
Thalisse?
The lease.
Thalisse, maybe?
Your lease is up, Josh. You have to.
It's Thalisse. You can all tell us in the comments the correct pronunciation. Reverent Medium. Thalisse, Reverent Medium. Sure. 3 white, black, 5 mana total for a 3/4 human cleric. Says at the beginning of each end step.
Ooh, spicy words in Commander.
Create X 1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying, where X is the number of tokens you created this turn. So on every end step, you check how many tokens did I create this turn. I'll make that many 1/1 spirits.
That's very powerful. Tokens matter in black and white. A card like Ophiomancer suddenly gets really, really good because you can sacrifice it, right? You're each snake, because at the beginning of each upkeep, if you don't control any snakes, you make a snake.
So you'll get a snake and then get a spirit on the end step.
Sacrifice the snake before it cuts to the next upkeep. Get
a snake and a spirit.
So that's 3 1/1s. Hey, have you seen this card before, Josh? It's called Smothering Tithe.
The funny thing about Smothering Tithe is that you don't think it would apply here, but Thalisse doesn't care about if they're creatures. It just says the number of tokens you've created this turn.
Gee.
Any kind. Clue tokens, treasure tokens. So with Smothering Tithe, it's just like, hey, get a treasure, and then on your end step, I made a treasure this turn, so I'll get a spirit.
Sometimes you get more than. Sometimes you get 2, 3 spirits.
Often because they're drawing cards, right?
It almost feels like a typo.
Yeah.
It just said creature tokens, but no, it just says tokens. So Pawn of Ulamog also makes tokens. Whenever Pawn or another non-token creature you control dies, you create a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature. Endrick Czar. Every time you cast a creature, you make X 1/1 black throw creature tokens.
And then if you have 7 or more, you have to sack them. But what you do is you sack the creature tokens before you get to 7.
To an altar to make more mana to cast more creatures.
Yeah, to hopefully never create 7 all at once. So the Endrick Star's always around.
But you can make 5 go to 0, make another 3 go to 0, and then boom, you make how many 1/1s? Sengir Autocrat is an older card. It makes 0/1 black surf creature tokens. Secure the Wastes. You can do this at instant speed to make X 1/1 white warrior creature tokens. Imagine if I just made 5 of those, 5 1/1s. That's a massive board state at someone's end step.
Yeah, that's 10 creatures for only like 6 mana.
Yeah.
Could be pretty brutal if you then go like pump spell attack.
Good point.
Martial Coup is another way to make a bunch of tokens, and it will destroy all other creatures if you make 5 or more. It's white, and X. Make
Pretty
X.
Good. Yeah, so 7 mana, wipe the board. Now you get 10 power because you get 5 flyers as well.
Yep.
Mentor of the Meek is very good in this kind of deck because you're going to want to draw more cards that way. And then you have your Lingering Souls and your Spectral Procession. You could just sort of make like a tokens matter.
Yeah, just deck. Cards that are just making 2 or 3 tokens are pretty good because they actually make 4 to 6 tokens, right?
Yeah.
And that changes the efficiency math on the CMC a lot because normally you're like, 3 mana make 2 tokens, not that good, but 3 mana make 4 tokens. That all of a sudden pushes it into the realm of playable.
Yeah, if you're going to put Thalisse into the 99, Elenda, the Dusk Rose, got a lot better with the Commander Dies rules changed this year. And so when Elenda dies, you're going to put a bunch of 1/1 vampire creature tokens with lifelink onto the battlefield equal to Elenda's power, and then boom, more spirits.
I actually think Elenda goes into the Thalisse deck because every time a creature dies, you put the counter on Elenda. So then you're sacking your creatures. Like we said, Endrick Czar, that kind of thing. Elenda gets pretty big. Then, before the end step on the turn before your turn, you sack Elenda, make 20, vampires and 20 1/1 flyers or whatever.
Can we just errata these both say partner?
Yeah. Seems broken.
Yeah.
This one's really good.
I like this one a lot. This is, I think, perfect for this kind of deck.
Yeah, so Pitiless Plunderer, 3 and a black for a 1/4. Whenever another creature you control dies, create a treasure token.
So it can be a token, which is really important here.
Plus so you sack a token, right? You sack your spirit token. That makes a treasure, which is going to make another spirit token.
Right.
And you can get into some loops, I think, where like at Jimmy's turn, you only got 2 flyers or 2 tokens that you made or whatever. But on his end step, you make 2 more. And then on the end step, if you have a sack outlet, you make 4 more. And now it comes back to your turn and you've got
16 or whatever.
Yeah, and 16 mana.
And you can keep it going,
from treasure
too.
tokens. Yeah,
Right.
So that's the one thing that you always want in a deck like this is to be able to just be really explosive, and Pitiless Plunderer gives you not only the token generation you need, but the mana then to take advantage of the fact that you made a lot of tokens.
The nice thing, too, is that you get to do this on other players' turns.
Yep.
So it's not just like play my commander, hope nothing happens, now I can do stuff the next turn. You can play Thalisse and have that engine going the moment you play her, as long as you have a sack outlet.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, very, very cool. Teysa Karlov used to sort of be the go-to for the tokens deck because your creature tokens get vigilance and lifelink, and then this was great with the sort of any dying triggers. It triggers an additional time. So
which you're going to have, because the way this deck is probably going to win is going to be those normal aristocrats style cards, right?
Yep.
Like Zulaport Cutthroat, Blood Artist, Bastion of Remembrance
a
makes
brand
a
new
token.
one. Yeah, makes a token and gives you the effect you need, and is an enchantment, so it's hard to remove.
Yeah, so that's like the perfect card in this deck. And then so those triggers will double up with Teysa, which if you're not going infinite, and this is not the type of deck that probably will, because of the way that Thalisse triggers.
It's like trade something in, get something back, sort of like it's just back and forth.
Yeah, it's going to be the classic, not infinite, but a lot. So I'm going to do, sack 10 things on Jimmy's end step. That'll make, or right before it.
Right.
That'll make 10 more things. And then on the next end step, I'll do that again. And then you're probably all dead. It wasn't infinite, but it's enough to kill everyone.
It definitely was enough.
Yeah.
And then if you're going to put this into the 99 of other decks, I thought Gave, Guru of Spores would be amazing, because this is a deck that's always just dropping tokens left and right with 1/1 counters, and then boom, Thalisse comes out when you have Gave out, and you just do some crazy thing, and now you have more fodder than before to sacrifice.
And it's a way to make tokens at instant speed.
Yeah, I really like this in Queen Marchesa as well, because when Queen Marchesa enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch, and then if an opponent is the Monarch at the beginning of your upkeep, you make a 1/1 black assassin creature token. So, and by the way, what better way to get Monarch back than with a 1/1 white flying spirit creature?
That's a good point, actually.
Yeah. And then if you're also playing red, you can play cards like Seasoned Pyromancer, the Chandras that make 3/1s, or like Elementals.
Oh, because those are tokens?
And then Young Pyromancer, similar idea. So there's a lot of different ways I think you could go. Thalisse just seems like a card that is great because it's good as commander. It's good in a lot of other decks. It's kind of where you want to be, I think, when it comes to like these are flexible cards.
Yeah, very, very cool.
Legends.
I think it'll be a fun deck. It's not going to be like crazy powerful or whatever, but it's going to do some cool stuff. Big splashy, lots of creatures out of nowhere type of deal.
Yep.
All right, let's talk about the next one. And spoiler alert, in the Extra Turns episode, we talked about earlier featuring the new cards from Commander Legends. And that's going to be out, I don't want to give an exact date, but it's around like the end of November.
Around when Commander Legends is coming out as well.
Yeah. This is going to be one of the commanders played in that game. It's Ghen, Arcanum Weaver, a red, a white, and a black. So 3 mana for a 2/3 legendary human wizard. It's got an activated ability, which is you pay Mardu, that's red, white, and black, and tap Ghen, and you sacrifice an enchantment. So pretty hefty cost.
Yep.
3 mana, tap, and sacrifice an enchantment. And then you return target enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield.
Oh my goodness. Wait, what? This is good.
Yeah.
This is just great, actually.
I mean, anytime we've seen effects like these where it brings things directly onto the battlefield, it's going to be powerful, because that can be cheating of mana cost, right? Whatever you're sacking costs a lot less plus the 3 mana into Ghen than whatever you're bringing back.
Look how good Goblin Welder is when it comes to doing this with artifacts. I don't think Mardu has had really this kind of ability before for enchantment specifically.
Yeah, Mardu enchantments I don't think is really a archetype that we've seen, right? Like that's just not, I don't even know if there's a deck that really I would call Mardu enchantments at this point. There's Mardu decks, but usually they're not enchantment decks. I can't really think of any. So
the important thing though is that you've got red in here, which means you can ditch cards to the graveyard easy peasy.
Yeah. Black helps you a lot there too.
Yeah, for sure.
To get things into the graveyard. Yeah, I like, obviously you're going to put like the white enchantress stuff, the normal stuff, but the fact that it's red and black means you're going to play a bunch of cards that probably aren't as common in enchantment type decks, because those are usually banned. So you usually got green and blue instead of these two colors. So I think it's cool. It opens up some doors for some enchantments that we don't see as much to maybe, have some fun, I guess. So
in terms of, because we're going to be mentioning this a lot, Wizards is obviously pushing these cards in different directions. I think this and what Thalisse was, these are good directions to me. This feels like
good
cool
power levels. Like this doesn't feel insane or anything, but I think you can do really cool stuff. So yeah, I agree with you. I like the design on both of those cards. So you're obviously going to want big splashy enchantments.
Oh yes.
So Jimmy, that's one of your favorites.
Yeah, Sunbird's Invocation. Well, it was my favorite until I played it on game nights, and then it quickly did not become my favorite.
It relies on luck, so I don't know why.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Sometimes, you know what? Actually, I just don't have
when the
great
cameras
luck.
aren't on, your luck is really good.
Yeah, exactly. All right, it's 5 and a red for an enchantment. Whenever you cast a spell from your hand, reveal the top X cards of your library, where X is that spell's converted mana cost, and you may cast a card revealed this way with converted mana cost X or less without paying its mana cost.
It's kind of cascadey.
Yeah, it's cascadey, but it's a 6-mana enchantment. It's so hard to play this in any games for me because you have to play this and then another spell to make it work. But Gen's going to be able to get it out pretty easily.
Yeah, if Gen can cheat it out, it's pretty awesome. Another enchantment you might want to cheat out with Gen is Eldrazi Conscription. It's 8 mana for an enchantment, Eldrazi Aura. And it enchants a creature, and that creature gets +10/+10 and an Annihilator 2. So this is a great way. And you could do this like at instant speed.
Oh, right.
With Gen, you need the attack trigger, so instant speed's not super helpful, but it still allows you to...
Well, let's say you play a creature that doesn't have haste. Wait till the end step.
Boom, put it on,
yeah.
And then untap, and now you're ready to really put the hurt on somebody.
Yeah. Or you
talk about putting the hurt on someone.
I was going to say, yeah, you want to talk about hurting someone. How about overwhelming them with a bunch of Splendor? This is normally a 6 white, 8-mana enchantment or a curse. You enchant a player, and creatures enchanted player controls loses all abilities and have base power and toughness 1/1. And then enchanted player can't activate abilities that aren't mana abilities or loyalty abilities. Rough!
It generally just says the player you enchanted cannot win the game.
Yeah, they quickly are going to lose the game now. That's disgusting because it's 8 mana. Typically, you're not really seeing this get played unless you're cheating it out.
Well, and also, Gen interestingly gets around things like counter spells.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can dump it in the bin and it's there, all of a sudden, like, you can really get a player that thinks they're ready for anything with their counter spells, and you're like, well, this is an activated ability. So unless it's a stifle, I'm not casting the Overwhelming Splendor. I am. Yeah. So that's pretty interesting. Of course, we're going to want like small enchantments. Because what you want to do is have an enchantment that doesn't cost a lot, that gives you some value, and then you cash that in with Gen for one of the big enchantments in your graveyard later. So land tax is a great one, right? Because after you've drawn like 9 cards off land tax, it's really not that helpful to you. 9 cards is awesome. It's worth playing just for that. But wouldn't it be great if then later I turn the land tax into an Eldrazi Conscription, Yeah,
but at a certain point, land tax will stop triggering.
Or it just won't be useful to you that it is, right?
Yeah, or you'll run out of basics. Yeah. And white is getting a little bit of help too in terms of catching up to land. So that makes land tax, it doesn't make it worse, but it just makes it a little less effective, I think, in the long game for a lot of these white decks that don't have traditional ramp.
Yeah, Curse of Opulence is another card that's like pretty good early, but later on in the game, people aren't as worried about one treasure here and there, and so cashing that in and turning it into a big enchantment is pretty cool. Like you said, Jimmy, getting the important cards into the bin is important. Black can help you because they have things like Entomb, which... I always thought, for a long time anyway, I thought Entomb could only go and find a creature, but it can find any card. So it's 1 black for an instant. Search your library for a card and put that card into your graveyard, then shuffle your library.
Yeah,
so this
is
good. Yeah, and if you have this in your hand too, on your end step, you don't look scary because people will be like, what's in your graveyard? Okay, that's not too scary. And then you go, boom, Entomb, put something awesome in there, activate again, get it out, and they're like, crap.
Yeah,
I thought
instant
we were fine.
speed on Entomb, really good. Buried Alive is the creature one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the really interesting thing, though, with Gen is because not only does it bring enchantments back, it gets rid of enchantments you have, and especially Black has a bunch of enchantments that you really don't want to have for very long.
Yeah. Demonic Pact is a really funny one. It's 2 black for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you choose one that hasn't been chosen. So there are 4 options. I'll just start and say that the final option is you lose the game. So typically you don't want this around by that point. But the other options are great. You draw 2 cards, target opponent discards 2 cards, Demonic Pact deals 4 damage to target creature or player, and you gain 4 life. So it's a removal spell, it's a card draw spell, it's a discard spell, and then it's a lose the game spell. However, with Gen out, you're not going to have to worry about that.
Yeah, you draw the cards, make somebody discard, and then you go, all right, now I'm done with it. I don't want to lose the game, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it into a Sunburn's Invocation. That seems pretty great.
Yeah, it seems really good.
There's Liliana's Contract, which is 3 black for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you draw 4 cards and lose 4 life. Wow. And then it says at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 4 or more demons with different names, you win the game. You're not going to have those demons in this deck. So after it's out there, it drew the cards, and it's just sitting there as fodder for Gen to turn into a better enchantment.
And 5 mana, 4 cards in Mardu, that's a good deal.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a very good rate.
There's a new card called Demonic Lore, which does a sort of similar thing.
Ah, yes. There's Mana Flare, which is, again, a card that if you can control the terms of it, right? If you can, that's why Goblin Welder is so good, is because you can be like, I don't need this until my turn. So Mana Flare is 2 in a red for an enchantment. Whenever either player or any player taps their land for mana, each land produces 1 extra mana. So it's basically doubling mana up. But you can have it in a way that Josh's end step, I use Ghen, get this out. My turn, I blah, 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 and then I tap it to get rid of the Mana Flare and replace it with something else.
Exactly. Just double my mana for my turn. And you don't lose the value. It's not like High Tide where it costs you a card, right?
Right.
You turn it into a different enchantment. So you still have a card's worth of value from it sitting there on the table, but you just doubled your mana for a turn. And then you can maybe do that again, right? Because it's still sitting in your graveyard. You sacked it. So it's the kind of card that you can kind of cycle in and out when it's advantageous for you. And I think Ghen can really do stuff like that.
Honestly, you only need like 1 or 2 turns with a Mana Flare type card to establish to win. Yeah.
Because you're like, I get 20 mana for a turn. That's usually enough to put you in an overwhelming position.
Pretty good, yeah.
Underworld Breach is a really good card for this. It's an enchantment for 1 in a red. Each non-land card in your graveyard has escape. The escape cost is equal to the card's mana cost, plus you exile 3 other cards from your graveyard. And then at the beginning of your end step, you sacrifice Underworld Breach. So,
oh no!
Yeah, so what you do is play this, play a couple of cards out of your graveyard with escape, and then activate Ghen, get rid of Underworld Breach because you're going to sack it anyway, and turn that into a big, cool enchantment.
Yep. And then, of course, you can make your enchantments a little scarier with cards like Opalescence and Starfield of Nyx. Everyone should just go watch that Melissa DeTore Game Nights episode again to watch a masterclass in how to manipulate enchantments on the board to do what you want. So Starfield of Nyx lets you return enchantments from your graveyard to the battlefield, which is great.
Yeah, every upkeep. Right.
And then as long as you control 5 or more enchantments, each other non-aura is a creature that has power and toughness equal to its CMC. So that might not always trigger, but this is great just to be able to get other enchantments out of your graveyard for free.
Well, and then eventually you do that long enough, they will all turn into creatures.
Yeah, but let's say it's, again, like turn 3 or 4. You put Starfield of Nyx out because you replace a Curse of Opulence with it, and then you get an Overwhelming Splendor, and then you can switch to Starfield for something else, or you have another enchantment to switch out. And Opalescence is basically the second half of Starfield, where it turns each other global enchantment into a power and creature toughness equal to its CMC.
Yeah, that's the way a lot of enchantment decks try and win, which is turn all my enchantments into creatures because I got so many and
smack ya.
And the problem with those 2 cards is that in a lot of enchantment decks, they're pretty reticent to play them because it opens them up
to removal.
To mass removal.
Yeah.
Ghen can kind of mitigate that by saying, I'm going to play Opalescence, I'm going to attack, but I'm going to hold enough mana open so that if something weird, crazy happens where you're going to be able to kill all creatures, I'll sacrifice that enchantment, turn all my enchantments into not creatures anymore so they don't die to your Wrath effect.
That's actually exactly what Melissa DeTore did. Yep. To fade some removal, which is pretty awesome.
Yep, Aura of Silence. I remember very well.
Yeah.
I was going to win that game. All right. And then, of course, Replenish is a card that would go in decks like this, which is just a sorcery for 3 and a white for return all enchantment cards from your graveyard to the battlefield.
Yeah, it's like the best recursion type thing. And then, of course, there
returns all of them.
Yeah, all of them. And there's a lot of enchantment creatures out there as well. Don't forget, you have the bestow creatures from Nyx, Journey into
Doomwake Giant is a good one.
Yeah, and so just look those up.
I think those are pretty cool commander.
Yeah,
mostly because of the color.
It's Mardu.
Yeah, it's because of the colors it's in. It's like all of a sudden, all these red and black enchantments that really haven't had a great home, they can do some cool stuff in this deck.
It reminds me a little bit of like Alesha, because Alesha, I think, also opened up a lot of people's eyes into the, wow, Mardu can do this? That seems pretty tricky, pretty combo-y, pretty combo-tastic. All right, last card before the break here. It's actually our preview card. It's Colfenor, the Last Yew. What happened to Colfenor, the Last Me? It's 3 in Abzan. There should be an eject button in this chair, so I just rock it out of here and every time I make a bad joke. All right, it's 3 in Abzan, so 3 white, black, and green for a legendary creature Treefolk Shaman, 3/7 with Vigilance and Reach. Whenever Colfenor or another creature you control dies, return up to 1 other target creature card with a lesser toughness from your graveyard to your hand. Now, in our preview card episode, which I believe is out, we talked a lot about just, butts matter and all this stuff, but Josh, you actually found a much more interesting route to go with this.
I think this card's quite powerful.
Wait, get it, root?
Root, haha.
Did not mean to do that
like
on purpose.
U, Y-E-U. I mean, so we're not going to go over the whole thing here. If you really want to go dive deep on Colfenor, we did an episode that's mostly about this card. Yeah. We did talk about our other preview cards, but it's like 90% about Colfenor. The real, I think, key to this card is creatures that have a higher toughness on the battlefield than they do in the graveyard. So that when you sack them, you can always get the other ones back, but then you play them. And so you do that with like creatures that have X in their cost, like Endless One, Hangerback Walker, Walking Ballista. These are all cards that are technically 0/0s in your graveyard, so you can always get them back when a creature dies, but they're bigger on the battlefield. And then you want to combine that with Anthem effects that pump the toughness and or power, but you really not and or power. They can pump power, but you don't care. You want to make sure that they buff toughness.
Yeah, the power doesn't affect the ability. Right. The toughness is the one that matters. So you can have a regular +1/+1 Anthem, or like Leyline of Vitality, which is just +0/+1.
Right, and either of those make your creature on the battlefield have greater toughness than it does when it's in the graveyard, and allows you to like play a 1/1, sack it, and get back something that's technically a 1/1, but you're going to play it, and it's really going to be a 1/3 or a 2/3.
Yeah. So with like a Blood Artist, and you have Hangerback Walker and Endless One, they're both X cost 0/0s. You have something that gives them all +0/+1. You can play it for 0 mana, and then when you sacrifice it, it's going to go to the graveyard, see a 0/0 in there, you return that to your hand. You play that, it's a 0/1 for 0 mana. You can sack that, and you can just sort of get that infinite loop going immediately.
Yep. Pretty interesting. And so you want, obviously, sack outlets. And then you're going to win with the normal Aristocrat stuff, which is, like you said, Zulaport, Blood Artist, Bastion of Remembrance, blah, blah, blah.
It's a party.
It's a party with a bunch of aristocrats all saying, ho, 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 cheers. Cruel Celebrant is also one of those cards.
You're not invited to this party. Ha, ha, ha. I mean, I feel like Aristocrats has gotten so many toys over the years.
And so many decks are Aristocrats decks. I think Murph was saying that like most of the last 10 episodes of Game Nights, there's at least like one Aristocrats style deck, or one that's at least partially Aristocrats at the table like every time. It's a very popular archetype.
Yeah. Shout out to Kathleen from Loading Ready Run, who loves Aristocrats.
Yeah. All right. We didn't mean to say you're not invited to the party. You're definitely going to be invited to the party, and there's more party coming right up, but we're going to take a quick break first and hear a message from our sponsors.
Welcome back to Who Wants a Million Mana? Josh has made his way to the final question. If he gets it correct, he'll win 1 million mana. Josh, how are you feeling?
I'm excited, Jimmy. A little nervous, but I think I can do this.
Okay, here's the question. Will you pay 1 for Rhystic Study? Yes, of course. I'd be stupid not to, or no.
Whew, wow. I think I'm going to use a lifeline, Jimmy.
All right, which one do you want to use?
I'm going to drink some G Fuel. I think I really need that boost of endurance, energy, and focus right now.
Bold move. But what flavor? There are so many delicious options to choose from. Remember, you can also get a starter kit that comes with a shaker cup and a variety of samples to test out.
I'm going with Sour Cherry, Jimmy. I've had it before. It's really, really good, and it's got 0 sugar.
Good choice. If anyone in the audience wants to try it out for themselves, go to gfuel.com and use the promo code CommandZone, all one word, at checkout to get 30% off your order if you order within the next few days. Okay, Josh, time to decide. What's your answer to will you pay the 1?
Oh, gosh, Jimmy. I'm going to go with no. Final answer.
I'm sorry, but that's incorrect.
So I don't get 1 million mana?
No, you lose the game. Sorry. Come on, that was an easy one. You always pay the 1 for Rhystic Study.
How's it, everybody? Welcome back to a new episode of Game Nights.
Greetings, I am Ashiok. Do not be afraid, for I am here with a very important message. A lot of you are not sleeping as well or as comfortably as you should be, which is a big problem for me. I mean, for you. Because there's nothing more important than a good night's rest, am I right? Many of you obviously don't know about the Purple Mattress. Purple has developed a patented technology called the Purple Grid that instantly adapts to your body and sleep style. This allows you to enjoy a very deep, uninterrupted sleep every single night. And in that state, it is so much easier for me to harness your nightmares, turn them into reality, and make them do my bidding. I mean, it makes you wake up in the morning much more refreshed and ready to face the day, of course. The best part about Purple is the open-air channels, which provide a cooling effect that other mattresses cannot replicate. Experience the Purple Grid and you'll sleep like never before. Go to purple.com/command10 and use promo code command10. For a limited time, you'll get 10% off any order of $200 or more. That's purple.com/command10, promo code COMMAND10 for 10% off any order of 200 or more. Terms apply.
So I don't know if it's the same for you, Jimmy, but and I think a lot of guys are like this. I don't know anything about self-care.
Oh, I'm exactly like that. I have never really researched it or put much thought into it, so.
Let me guess, you go to the grocery store and whatever soap or deodorant they have, you just buy that.
Yep, it's been the same for 20 years now.
Have you ever thought how crazy that is? I mean, we will spend hours and hours like figuring out the exact right card to go into our commander deck, but we'll do zero research at all about something that's going to go on our skin every single day.
Yeah, I mean, when you put it that way, it is pretty nuts.
So there's this website called Hawthorne. They're a premium tailored personal care brand, and their whole thing is trying to make it easy on guys like us to look, feel, and smell our best. On their site, they have you take a really simple quiz. It asks you stuff like how long is your hair or what type of job do you have. It's super fast and easy. And then based on your answers, they recommend products that are tailored specifically to you. I ended up with some shampoo and deodorant that I really, really like, and it's way better than that supermarket stuff.
Ah, makes sense. I was wondering why you smelled so good lately.
I'm glad you noticed. So do what I did. Take Hawthorne's quiz today and get started on your personalized self-care routine by going to hawthorne.co and use promo code COMMAND to get 10% off your first purchase.
That's HAWTHORNE.co with promo code COMMAND. Hawthorne.co, promo code COMMAND. All right, we are back talking about Commander Legends Part 1, non-partner Commander Legends, and Commander Legends cards that don't go in the 99, that could potentially go in the 99, but they're also just solo commanders.
Solo commanders, I think, is what we'll call them.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Okay, we are on to blue-red now. We also should mention that with the color pairings, because there are always two of each, one of them is uncommon and one of them is rare. So the uncommon ones, I think we'll find, have generally a lower power level. And this is the uncommon one.
But yeah.
Yeah, not always. This is the uncommon one for blue and red. It's Captain Vargus Wrath. Kind of looks like an orc from World of Warcraft. It's blue and red for a 1/1 legendary creature orc pirate. Whenever Captain Vargus Wrath attacks, pirates you control get +1/+1 until end of turn for each time you've cast a commander from the command zone this game. Not terribly interesting. We will note that there are a lot of pirates in Commander Legends. So
one of the is the blue-red theme for draft, right?
It's definitely the draft archetype. I could see this being a really good commander in that deck if you were to go super aggro.
When they design draft, too, a lot of the ways they design draft is that a lot of the payoff cards for each archetype are at uncommon.
Right.
So this seems more like a draft card, honestly.
Yeah, the only thing that's interesting here is for each time you've cast a commander from the command zone this game. So it's probably a good chance for us to mention that there are cards that say this in the past that are really good, especially with a commander we'll talk about later, like Rogue Rock, who costs 0 mana to play.
And I think you also want to, like, Captain Vargus maybe goes in a deck that has a couple of low-cost partners.
Yeah.
Because it counts each time you've cast a commander from the command zone. So if you cast each partner once, that's twice. Whereas casting the same commander twice will cost you a lot more mana because commander tax.
Yep.
So yeah, it seems like that might be a deck where your goal is to cast your partner commanders a bunch and get some sort of advantages that way.
Yeah, and if you do that, there's a cycle of these storm cards. There's Fury Storm and Echo Storm, which are the blue and red ones. Fury Storm is copying target instants or sorceries, but you copy it for each time you've cast your commander from the command zone in this game. So there maybe is an archetype somewhere to get your commander out of the bunch, sack it, play the bunch, do something interesting. Maybe even like in the Liesa deck because you don't have to pay the commander tax.
Yeah, and if Captain Vargus is in the 99, then maybe you can add a couple of other colors with the partners you're using and, get some of the other Commander Storm cards. Little known fact about this card is his first name is Louis Scott.
Louis Scott, Captain Louis Scott Vargus, Wrath. Wrath edition, limited edition.
All right, the rare commander is Zara, Renegade Recruiter. This one's a lot more fun, I think.
Yeah, this one's real spicy.
3 blue, red, so 5 mana for a legendary human pirate. 4/3 with flying, though. Whenever Zara attacks, look at defending player's hand. You may put a creature card from it onto the battlefield under your control, tapped and attacking that player or a planeswalker they control. Return that creature to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step.
So you're stealing cards out of other people's hands, very pirate status, but not just that, you're doing the thing where you active aggression them and they're like, I'm going to swing for you now.
Yeah, you steal it out of their hand, and it's tapped and attacking them.
Yeah.
And then at the end of turn, it goes back to their hand.
Right.
So it's cheating of mana cost in a way. It's really interesting. You'll have to sort of be guessing who's got what when you go to attack with Zara. Of course, you don't always have to guess. There are cards which will allow you to look at other players' hands, and I think that's kind of the first category of card that this deck will want.
Yeah, there's Telepathy, a Craig Blanchett favorite. It's just a blue enchantment for blue that says your opponents play with their hands revealed. This also happens to slow down the game significantly.
Too much information. Everyone's got to think way more.
Yeah, should I do this? Well, there's 3 hands to think about now.
Yeah, it's like, wait, hold on, I'm going to think of doing something. What do you have in your hand again? How about you? What do you have?
Yeah.
But still, with Zara, you'll know exactly who to attack and who's got the best stuff.
Yeah, if you have the Glasses of Urza, a much older card, you just tap the artifact and you get to look at target player's hands, so you don't have to show everyone.
Right.
But more importantly, let's think about ways that we get to keep these cards around, which I think is great, or use the cards in an interesting way. Sundial of the Infinite has just been a card that we've mentioned, 1,000 times on the show now. It has an activated ability where you pay 1 and tap it to end the turn. So you exile spells and abilities from the stack, you do your end of turn stacks, and then the until end of turn effects end. So the Zara Renegade Recruiter creature you steal sticks with you forever.
Yeah, so you're looking for, with Sundial of the Infinite, we're going to talk about this more later for another commander, but things that say at the beginning of the next end step. Because if you end the turn before you go to your end step, those triggers... Oh, sorry. You have to end the turn after you go to the end step. So you go to end step, that trigger goes onto the stack, and then in response to the trigger, before it resolves, you tap the Sundial and end the turn. And
so
now
you exile spells and abilities from the stack.
So effectively, whatever creature you took out of their hand, you just keep it now forever, because Zara won't trigger again and say, hey... She says what Zara sees is like, I triggered. I tried to put it back in their hand and something stopped me. I'm not going to trigger again. I just keep that thing now.
Yeah, the creature never returns. The ability goes away. This is also great if someone does like an end step spell on like instant. They cast to secure the way, so you can use Sundial to stop it, basically, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But that's only during your turn. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, they would have to do it on your end step, but that happens sometimes.
Yeah.
Usually if Sundial's out, they won't do this stuff like that.
Yeah, it kind of just stops that entirely.
So that's a way to keep the creatures you're stealing forever. Obviously, if you have other people's creatures, then you really don't want to give them back, right?
Mm-hmm. Fling them away. One of my favorite things to do. You either have a sacrifice outlet like a Goblin Bombardment, or Fling, which are cards that allow you to sacrifice a creature and do something with it. Either damage, add mana, whatever it is. Lots of sack outlets out there. This definitely is the meaner thing to do. Attack someone, steal their best thing that they're going to do something amazing with, and then wreck them. Sometimes people, when their commanders get bounced too, they'll put it in their hand instead of the command zone, so you could steal a commander potentially.
They're not doing that if you're playing Zara, though.
Yeah,
they got to put it back in the command zone.
Yeah.
I think this deck's going to play the altars and stuff like Goblin Bombardment and things like Fling. And, because why give that creature back to them? Now, instead of just stealing the creature out of their hand and smacking them with it, maybe getting an enter the battlefield effect or something, you are also effectively making them discard that card because you're going to sack it. And you're going to get some other sort of effect, a little bit of mana, do some extra damage. Maybe it has a dies effect too, so you might want to get that when it dies effect. So I think that's a pretty effective way. Jimmy, this also seems really good in one of your favorite decks.
Yeah, it's Marchesa. Now, Marchesa says...
The Black Rose.
The Black Rose, sorry, the original Grixis one. However, Marchesa does say that you need to have a creature attack someone for the dethrone trigger to get a +1/+1 counter on it. But if you have Zara out and you have a way, I think there's only one way right now to get an instant speed +1/+1 counter on the creature, you can do the whole Marchesa thing where Marchesa's out, Zara swings, steals a creature, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, you sack it, and Marchesa brings that creature back to you at the end step. So you sack
under your control, not
under your control. Yeah, so which is great because you get to keep the creature. You skip the entire trigger where it tries to return the creature back to its owner's hand, because by the time it's dead, it doesn't see the creature anymore. So I could see this working in the Marchesa deck. If not, even if you can't get the creature back, this deck has tons of sack outlets, and Zara just seems like a really good fit in there.
You don't have to add the counter at instant speed because you do have the time after your combat phase.
You're right.
Yeah, so you can do it at sorcery speed because your second main phase you can.
Or if you play extra turn spells, you untap everything, attack again with those creatures, and then they'll get the dethrone trigger.
Well, no, extra combat steps, but extra turns would trigger an end step, so it would still go back to
extra combat steps.
Yeah.
My bad.
There's also things like Strionic Resonator and the new Lithoform engine, which will allow you to double Zara's trigger, steal 2 creatures out of their hand and swing with them. That seems pretty good. Also, if you have an altar or something, that's 2 cards they effectively discard when you do that. Seems pretty brutal.
Yeah, this seems really brutal. This is reaching Centriplets level of people
it's
not
quite
like you.
as bad because you do have to get off an attack. And also, like, most of the time you can only steal one thing, whereas Send Triplet's like, hey, your entire hand is open to me now. But yes, it's definitely like leaning towards Send Triplets, I'd say.
Yeah, people don't like it when that happens. And of course, there are a lot of ways to double up the value you get from Zara. Flame Shadow Conjuring is a card that doesn't really see that much play, but it allows you to pay red whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, and you can create a copy, and that token gains haste. However, it does get exiled at the next end step, so you want a Sundial of the Infinite. Or
I think just enter the battlefield effects. I think the most common thing Zara is going to do for you is you attack, look at their hand, and like it's pretty rare that somebody has a Blightsteel Colossus in their hand. More likely, they've got a Solemn Simulacrum, a Reclamation Sage, something of that, an Eternal Witness, because those are the kind of cards that are just more prevalent. Yeah. So you're likely to get something like that, which is great because now it's like, oh, Zara doesn't cost you any mana to do her effect, so 1 red is likely to be open for you, and then you're just like, hey, I get 2 Eternal Witness triggers, and I don't really care what happens after that.
Pretty good. Another thing you can do when you get those creatures, knowing that they might have to return to their owner's hand, is clone them. So as long as they're not legendary, you can use...
No, you want them to be legendary.
Oh, I see. Actually, that's a good point. If they are legendary, then even better. Because when you create the clone, you get to choose which legendary copy to create, and that's almost like a sack outlet for their creature.
Yeah, so clones are great too because there's a lot of good clones, but they say you can only clone creatures you control.
Yeah.
And they have other abilities, like you can flash them back or whatever because of that, but that's usually not as good because you want to be able to pick from the best creature on the board, but this is a way to clone your opponent's creature. Phantasmal Image doesn't have that clause, but it's just 2 mana. So
that's an insane clone.
Yeah, you get their awesome thing, make a clone of it, maybe sack it if it's legendary, and now you have the copy of it. And then there's a really interesting one, Renegade Doppelganger. This is 1 and a blue for an 0/1 shapeshifter, but it says whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may have Renegade Doppelganger become a copy of that creature until end of turn. I love this one because with like Phantasmal Image, you have to attack with Zara, get a good creature out of their hand. It's tapped and attacking them. It has to survive that combat.
Right.
And then in your second main, you clone it. This one, Renegade Doppelganger, you attack with it and Zara, and then pick a cool creature out of their hand, and then the Renegade Doppelganger is still attacking and becomes that thing. And, if it's not legendary, you maybe have 2 awesome things attacking them. You don't get enter the battlefields and stuff like that this way, but it seems pretty interesting.
Yeah, notably, the creature you steal with Zara does have to keep attacking the same person. So let's say it's like a Steve. It's a 1/1 or something. It's like, it's not going to survive the combat. Yeah. But with the Renegade Doppelganger, you'll make sure that you get a copy of it because it changes into it. You don't even have to swing with the Renegade Doppelganger. Maybe it has a cool activated ability that you want. Who knows?
And then there's the ability to blink and keep things forever. And most of these blink cards target only creatures you control.
Yeah.
And then they return. It's because in the old wording, they didn't say return to the battlefield under owner's control. They said return to the battlefield under your control, kind of like Marchesa.
Yep.
And so like Ghostly Flicker is a really good way to keep the creature forever because you attack with Zara, get the trigger, steal a card out of their hand, it hits them for some damage, and then you say Ghostly Flicker, which is 2 and a blue for an instant, exile 2 target artifacts, creatures, and or lands you control, then return those cards to the battlefield under your control.
Woo!
Because they've exiled and come back, they're considered new permanents, so that Zara trigger to return that creature to your opponent's hand is no longer there because it doesn't think the permanent's the same anymore, and so you just keep their creature forever.
Yeah, because, again, when it leaves the battlefield and comes back, the Zara will look for it, be like, where'd it go? Like, well, it's not here anymore, even though that same creature's on your battlefield.
Yep.
Pretty neat. And then the same thing goes for Deadeye Navigator.
Yes.
Just soul bond the creatures.
Yeah, soul bond only really works with creatures you control, but because you are taking their creature momentarily and controlling it, then you blink it with Deadeye Navigator and just keep it forever. That's a pretty good one.
Yeah, so Zara seems like a lot of fun, especially for an Izzet build. It's about stealing creatures and doing so in an attacky setting, but you can build a lot around it, so I like the design of this card.
Yeah, and I think you use a lot of like threaten effects and things too, because most of those will also work with like the Ghostly Flicker stuff and the, and the Deadeye and things like that. Yeah, so I think that deck would actually be pretty fun, but it's not going to be super powerful because it relies on your opponents having creatures in their deck.
Yeah, which is usually a pretty good thing to rely on, but there will be cases when 1, maybe even 2 players just don't have a creature-heavy deck, in which case you're just targeting one person and then you're kind of letting those Stormy players go off or do whatever they're doing.
It is a little unfortunate. You have to attack the player you stole the creature from, too. So, like, if somebody's playing like a spell deck, you're just like, well, I can't attack you, and then I'm kind of never attacking you, right? Because I can't steal anything from you. I'm not going to get value.
Yeah. Make a lot of enemies with that deck, probably. Okay, moving on. Speaking of blue and red, it pairs up with 2 3-color pairings here. We have, first up, Temur. And this is Averna, the Chaos Bloom, which I think actually looks more impressive than it actually is. It's green, blue, and a red for a 4/2 legendary creature elemental shaman. As you cascade, you may put a land card from among the exiled cards onto the battlefield tapped. And it says, do this after the last card is exiled, but before deciding whether to cast a non-land card. So when you cast a card with Cascade, let's say it's Maelstrom Wanderer. That's a little confusing. Let's just it's any creature with Cascade in them. You start flipping cards from the top of your library until you find a card with CMC that costs less, a non-land card, and then you're able to cast that card for free. So
Right.
Averna says, do all that, find the card, get to there, and then you can choose, do I want to put a land on the battlefield? And then you choose if you want to cast the card that you cascaded into.
You have to have flipped a land too. So let's say
Right.
that you cast like a 3 CMC. Let's say you cast like a Shardless Agent. It's going to cascade on cast. So you're going to flip cards off the top of your library until you hit something that's 2 CMC or less. If you the first card is a Signet,
You'll
cast that with Cascade, but no land was flipped on the Cascade, so you won't put a land into play.
Right.
So you have to have flipped a few cards and hopefully gotten some lands in there before you found a Cascade target.
Yeah.
So it's not going to get you a land every single time. I think a lot of people are assuming that it will. It can get you a land a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think it's still pretty likely. And the only problem is, though, is that Cascade isn't a very common mechanic. And before Commander Legends, there were only 8 Cascade cards in the Teamer colors.
Wow, that's it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's because we all just think of Maelstrom Wanderer, which is the big cascade, the double cascades on cast, an 8-mana massive spell, or a Yidris Maelstrom Wielder, which is really good with Infect, as you know. So I think yeah. So prior to this set, there's not too much Cascade stuff. So I think Averna looks a little more cool on its front than it actually is. But getting 2 cards off a Cascade is a pretty darn good value.
It's interesting because Averna doesn't actually give you the ability to cascade more either. You have to cast cards that have Cascade. It's Cascade Tribal kind of, but it doesn't provide the Cascade part of it. So there's more in Commander Legends. So we're well past 8, but still, I find it hard to believe you're going to have 25 cards in your deck that have Cascade on it then. Maybe you can there's other cards that give your cards Cascade. So, maybe you're building it to hopefully find those cards to really get this going.
I think you put this card into the Maelstrom Wanderer or Yidris deck. I don't think this is your commander just because, you want to have a guaranteed way to cascade, and this is just like a cherry on top. Oh, you also get a land, but you're in green, blue, and red, so you're going to be able to ramp out with green anyway. So that's why I think just on its face, it's not that amazing. Plus, you might not get a land sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. But let's talk about some of the Cascade cards though that do exist. Since I do think Cascade Tribal as a deck could be an interesting build with this at the helm.
Yeah, I would say definitely look through the Commander Legends cards and start seeing which ones are interesting in these colors. Otherwise, the one that people are all like, ooh, finally, this card's better is Throes of Chaos, which is just 3 in a red for a sorcery that says Cascade. But it also has Retrace, so you can cast it from your graveyard by discarding a land card in addition to paying its other costs. So there might be a world where you keep a land in your hand, knowing that when you play Throes of Chaos, there's a good chance to hit a land, and then you can Retrace, discard that land, Cascade again, and cast this again. So Averna just makes this card actually not as bad as it looks.
Yeah, I think that's probably the play pattern with Throes of Chaos, if you know you have it, is you actually want to hold a couple of lands and not play them, and you're going to rely on the Cascade to get you the lands. That seems pretty cool.
I think if you were to build around this deck, though, you just want landfall.
Yeah, that's what it seems like to me. You want 45 lands in this deck, right? Because you really want to hit a land every time you Cascade with something.
Yeah.
So it's as many Cascade cards or Cascade Granters as you can get, and then a bunch of lands, and then you're going to try and win with, some of the heavy hitting landfall cards, right?
Yep. So there's a lot of the Omnaths care about landfall, obviously, and they fit within these colors. Morag, Fury of Akum, gives you extra combat steps. So a huge turn would be have haste on the battlefield, play a massive spell, you cascade into lands. If it's Maelstrom Wanderer, you cascade into 2 lands, you get 2 extra combat steps.
Oh, Maelstrom Wanderer can get you 2 lands all by itself?
Yeah.
Because it cascades twice? That's cool.
There's Phylath World Sculpture, which I played on game nights, Scoot Swarm. So there's a lot of really good landfall things. I think this deck is all about getting just Teamer beatdown, getting haste on creatures, cascading, and having one of those turns where everyone goes, that's 40 damage. We're all dead.
Yeah, good landfall cards are not hard to find. It's going to be hard to find the good Cascade cards, right?
Yes.
And to have a nice balance of both. Yeah. Temur Sabertooth we have on the list here as a card you might play in this deck. It's 2 green for a 4/3, but it has an activated ability. 1 in green, you may return another creature you control to its owner's hand. If you do, Temur Sabertooth gains indestructible until end of turn. This is a way to bounce a creature that has Cascade to be able to replay it to trigger Averna again, because I think you're right. I was surprised by how few Cascade cards there were, and if
tell Commander Legends,
yeah. But even then, there's not going to be 12 or 15 awesome Cascade cards.
You're already kind of digging through just to be like,
so if you've got 15 Cascade cards, you're going to want to be able to reuse the really good ones, and so Temur Sabertooth can maybe give you the ability to do that.
Good old Crystal Shard as well, as we've seen before. Just get value. More value.
There is that new card, that Apex Devastator that's Cascades, 4 times?
Yeah, so you could get 4 lands off it.
Well, I mean, also, you're going to get 4 things.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a Sensi's Divining Top, too, this could be really good. Gosh. Activate it so you sort that there's always a land, just in case you're not going to hit things correctly.
It's a bajillion mana, but you are cascading into lands and ramping that way, because it does put them into play. So, I want to see somebody pull that off. Not against me. Like I want somebody to send me a Twitter picture of it. So it's not happening to me.
Yeah, that seems kind of nutty.
All right. The next one, near and dear to my heart. So we haven't talked about it yet, but when you were in New Zealand shooting Mulan, and we've alluded to the fact that I have drafted this set a couple years ago. What happened is Wizards invited me out to kind of visit their offices. And while I was there, they let me draft Commander Legends. This is late 2018.
Apparently this set's been in development for like 5-6 years.
Yeah.
So
they sort of knew it was coming out in 2020, but I don't think they had an exact date at that point. But it was in a pretty good spot, and I was able to draft it. And then as a result of doing that, they asked some of us here at the Command Zone to kind of help them with some play testing. So they allowed us to see some of the early designs of the cards, and they wanted us to build some decks and play some games and then give them some feedback. They're always looking for feedback that's sort of outside what they call their biodome, because they're very aware that they're pretty insulated with only the few people in there, and so they're always looking for outside perspective. So we had a fun opportunity to kind of give a little bit of feedback on this set very early on. A lot of things have changed, obviously, in 2 years, but this next commander we're about to talk about, as a result, I built this deck 2 years ago. And I'm also playing this deck on the next episode of Extra Turns, not Game Nights. I'm playing a different deck on Game Nights. And this was the commander when I saw the set where I was like, oh, man, I hope they don't change that one. I hope it makes it to the final version of the set. And it did. It's Obeka, Brute Chronologist. It's 1 blue, black, red, so 1 in Grixis, for a 3/4 legendary ogre wizard, and has a activated ability. You can tap Obeka, and it says the player whose turn it is may end the turn.
Wow. So similar to Sundial of the Infinite. However, this can happen to any player on any turn.
Right. So again, you exile all spells and abilities from the stack. The player whose turn it is discards down to their maximum hand size. Damage wears off, and this turn and until end of turn effects end. Yeah, it's interesting wording, because Sundial, you end the turn, but you can only do that on your turn.
Right.
This you can do on other players' turn, but it gives the player whose turn it is the choice to end the turn. So you can't just be like, it's during Jimmy's turn, I tap Obeka and be like, I end your turn, Jimmy.
I go, well, it's a May ability, and I decide no.
Yeah, what it does is it asks the player whose turn it is. So instead, I would tap Obeka and be like, Jimmy, would you like to end your turn?
And I'd be like, no. And you're like, crud. Well, I guess Obeka's tapped.
You might want to, though. Let's say you did a big attack and they go Cyclonic Rift. And I'm like, well, I can end the turn, and the Cyclonic Rift won't happen. I mean, you won't get the rest of your turn, but all your stuff won't get bounced, and neither will mine. And in that case, you might be like, yeah, okay, let's end that turn.
Yeah, or someone casts a huge counterspell or does something else to you on your end step. You can be like, hold up. And so this actually does what I was talking about with Sundial earlier, which is allows you to really fully disrupt the full turn cycle at least once.
When Obeka's out, because having played the deck a number of times, it really does kind of screw up what people can do and how they have to play, because they are like kind of guessing, well, if I do this thing on the end step of that person's turn, which I would normally do, crack my fetch land even.
Oh, jeez.
They team up with Josh to just screw me.
Yeah, that's rough.
The answer a lot of times is yes. So you don't really want to hold up and crack fetch lands on other people's turns. You want to do it on your turn, because if you crack a fetch land during your turn and I go, do you want to end the turn? You go, no.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and resolve that trigger.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Really sucky. Obeka is interesting, though. I really like how this plays out. However, without untappers, you can only do this once per turn cycle. So that's another thing to be in consideration of, too. And so maybe you do things a little earlier. Maybe you do crack a little fetch land during, someone, or wait until someone else gets Obeka'd out.
Yeah, wait till Obeka's tapped or something to do stuff. Yeah. All right, but Obeka also makes a lot of cards really good. And like we said with Sundial of the Infinite earlier, what you're looking for is effects that trigger at the beginning of the next end step. Because those are the ones where you wait till that trigger goes on the stack and then you activate Obeka and then, you don't have to deal with that trigger again. So a lot of times you get to keep things forever that were supposed to be sacrificed and things like that.
Yeah.
The best card in the deck, I'm pretty sure, Jimmy, and I'll let you read it because it's your favorite card.
It's Sneak Attack. It's one of my favorite cards. 3 and a red for an enchantment. Very important text here. You can pay a red. You may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. That creature gains haste. Sacrifice the creature at the beginning of the next end step.
This effectively, with Obeka out, lets you put all your creatures into play for 1 red mana each and keep them forever because you wait until the end step, trigger goes on the stack, sneak attack says, okay, now you got to sacrifice that creature. And Obeka goes, I'll just end the turn. Then I don't have to sack it, and now I get to keep it. So you play a lot of big, scary Jin-Gitaxias, Blightsteel Colossus type stuff in the deck. Not too many, because you don't want them stuck in your hand if you don't have Sneak Attack. But Sneak Attack, if you ever get it out in this deck, is nutso, because you have these turns where you just go, pay 3 red mana, put Jin-Gitaxias, Blightsteel Colossus, and, Shieldred out. With haste, attack, end the turn, keep them all. That's a nutso turn that you effectively just cast 20-something mana worth of stuff.
What if you took some extra turns while you're at it?
Yeah, so this is the other class of cards that Red has, and there's 3 of them we're going to talk about here. Final Fortune, Last Chance, and Warrior's Oath. And these all have basically the same text. 1 is an instant and 2 are sorceries. But they say take an extra turn after this one, and they all cost 2 red mana. That's
Sweet.
it.
What a great deal.
There's
no downside, right?
Yeah. The downside of all of them is at the end of that turn, the extra turn, you lose the game.
Oh.
So 2 mana, take an extra turn is power 9 power, right? That's a banned card.
Yeah.
And the fact that these have this downside is what kind of keeps them in check. But again, that says at the beginning of your next turn, you lose the game. So with Obeka out, you just get 2 mana, extra turn spells. Also, these spells do not exile themselves.
Yeah, so
when you cast them, so you can Snapcaster Mage and things them.
You are in blue and red and black, which is great at graveyard recursion.
Yeah, so those are nutso cards in the deck, just way undercosted with Obeka out. And the fact that you tap Obeka there, it doesn't matter. You're taking the extra turn.
Right.
I guess that's at the end of the extra turn, but still, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Then there's all these cards that get cards out of graveyards and then say, for very cheap, and usually give them haste, and then usually say sacrifice or exile it at the beginning of the next end step. So Puppeteer Click steals creatures out of other players' graveyards, out of opponents' graveyards.
Has persist, so it'll do it twice.
Yep. Usually you have to, at the beginning of your next end step, exile it, but no, just keep it forever because of Obeka. Cauldron Dance is a really cool one.
Oh yeah, 6 mana, it's an instant. I've actually never seen this card before because it was one of those ones that sort of slipped by in the commander sets. But you can only cast it in combat. You return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste, and you return it to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. And you can also put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield, and that creature gains haste, and its controller sacrifices at the beginning of the next end step. So you do 2 things. You take something from the graveyard on the battlefield that goes to your hand, and you take something from your hand on the battlefield that then goes to the graveyard. But you just get to get both, and they both stay on the battlefield with the Obeka trigger.
Yeah, 6 mana, cheat 2 things into play. 1 from graveyard, 1 from hand. They both get haste, and then end the turn, just keep them on the battlefield forever. Well, until somebody destroys them or whatever.
Right.
There's also Gruesome Encore, which is 2 and a black for a sorcery. Put target creature card from an opponent's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It gains haste, exile at the beginning of the next end step. Again, keep it forever. Speaking of Encore, there's a brand new mechanic.
That's right.
In Commander Legends that's very, very good with Obeka. Encore and Obeka are just really good friends.
Yeah, so Encore usually has a cost associated with it, and then it says for each opponent, create a token copy of this card, that's usually in your graveyard, it has to be in your graveyard, sorry, that attacks that opponent, and they gain haste, and you sack them at the beginning of the next end step. So if you have 3 opponents, it's kind of like Myriad. You make 3 copies of a card that you create. There's a card called Arumi of the Dead Tide, which is 1 a blue and a black. Exile, you tap it 2 exile cards from your graveyard equal to the number of opponents you have, and then a target creature card gains Encore, so then you can cast the Encore card. So Arumi just lets you buy back stuff constantly. You're going to get 3 copies of it if you have 3 opponents, and then Obeka makes sure they stick around. We'll talk more about Arumi in our next set review episode.
Yeah, but Arumi gives things Encore, so if you had like Moldrifter in your graveyard,
oh gosh,
normally you're drawing 6 cards, which is good, but then it also sticks around for you. I guess that doesn't matter with Moldrifter, but you see what I'm saying? If you get a really good card in your graveyard and can give it Encore, also there's Encore cards in the set that are just good in this deck because they already have Encore, so when they're in your graveyard, you Encore them out. And normally that's like a big splashy play, but you get 3 of something, but then they go away. Obeka says, no, I'll just keep those. That's pretty cool. Another mechanic that is good with Obeka is Dash.
Yeah.
So Dash is an alternate cost on spells that allows you to cast the spell for its Dash cost. If you do, it gains haste, and then it's returned from the battlefield to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. Usually Dash is a cheaper cost. Again, Obeka will allow you to keep the creature out and not return to your hand. There's a card called Flame Rush Rider, really good in the deck because this card has Dash for 2 red. It's a 3/3, but it says whenever it attacks, you put a token onto the battlefield tapped and attacking that's a copy of another target attacking creature. Exile the token at the end of combat.
Oh, okay.
So if you know you have this card, you can make all your plays in the first main, go to your combat, attack with Flame Rush Rider, make a copy of something, and then keep the copy because of Obeka, end the turn.
Yeah.
When that trigger goes on the stack at the end of combat.
Notably, the end of combat, we've seen this a bunch with like reconnaissance and stuff. You can have combat damage happen before there is the end of combat phase. So you can have your combat do all of the damage, do all of the effects, and then end the turn, and you'll still get damage through.
Flame Shadow Conjuring, which we already talked about, makes copies of creatures when you have creatures ETB, and those copies exile at the beginning of the next end step. If you ever get Flame Shadow Conjuring and Sneak Attack out at the same time, you're probably just going to win because you go pay 1 red, put Blightsteel out, pay another red, make a copy of it.
Blightsteel, yeah.
They both have haste, by the way.
And they're sticking around.
Yeah. Zara says at the beginning of the next end step when it steals cards out of people's hands tapped and attacking, so you get to keep those forever. Zara's really, really good.
I think Obeka also just goes again in the Marchesa deck and vice versa. There's lots of sneaky things you can do here.
Mimic Vat is another thing that creates a token just for the turn, but you'll get to keep it forever.
But now you get one every single turn because it's a repeatable effect.
Oh, here's a mean one.
Oh, Desolation. 1 black. At the end of each turn, every player that tapped a land for mana during that turn sacks a land. And if a plains is sacrificed to state, Desolation deals 2 damage to that controller. However, this is not about the plains so much.
So it's an enchantment. So it just sits there, and each player who tapped a land for mana
has to sack
during that turn sacks a land. If it's a plains, it deals 2 damage. But yes, so this means that you're just going to be ending the turn when your end step comes every time. So you won't sack lands to Desolation, but your opponents will.
Yeah, that's rough.
Then there's stuff like Void Walk, I really like. It's 3 and a blue for a sorcery. Exile target creature. Return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. And it has Cipher. So it goes on to a creature after you cast it. And then every time you deal combat damage with that creature, you cast the spell again.
So this is just perma exile.
Yeah, because you exile a creature, it goes to the exile, and then Void Walks triggers at the beginning of the end step saying, hey, bring that creature back. And you go, nah, I'm just going to end the turn so that creature never comes back.
Oh, I like that a lot. That's actually really tricky.
Word to the wise, if somebody does this to your commander and they're playing Obeka, just put it into the command zone.
Yeah,
do not get it stuck in exile forever.
That would, rough.
Then there's some interesting card draw cards. I really like this one.
Psychic Vortex, it's 2 blue, and it has a cumulative upkeep of draw a card. So you draw 1 the first turn, 2 the next turn.
Yeah,
however, at the end of each of your turns, sacrifice a land and discard your hand. How about not?
Because, again, triggers on stack. So this first turn, you draw a card. Second, you draw 2. Then you draw 3. By the fourth turn, I mean, it's crazy.
You got to make sure you have Obeka and the Sundial out. Otherwise, if one gets rid of one or both, you are just discarding your hand.
You really want like some way, so like Lightning Greaves before you even cast it. You know? Just
totally.
Try to be as safe as possible. Then there's Ideas Unbound, which is blue for sorcery. Draw 3 cards. Discard 3 cards at end of turn.
Oh, 2 mana, draw 3 cards? Yep. You're getting into Ancestral Recall territory there.
Yeah, so Obeka, really, really cool deck. I think there's a lot of interesting things you can do with it. So
yeah, I would go the untapper route, so you could use Obeka a lot and just constantly be a nuisance.
I think you really only want to be able to untap her once, because in my experience, you almost never actually run into an instant or an an instance where
you need it on
another player
turn.
will allow you to end their turn.
I see,
It's very rare. But having Obeka untapped during other players' turns does make them have to worry about it and play differently. So that is useful.
Right. Good point.
All right. Well, we went really in depth on Obeka, but
I mean, this does seem like of all the commanders so far, I'm very likely to build something around Obeka or Zara, or include them in the rest of my decks.
all right.
Okay, moving on. We are now in Golgari. We'll go alphabetical here. So we first up have the uncommon. It's the Abomination of Llanowar. 1, a black and a green. This art is awful. It's star with vigilance and menace. It's a legendary elf horror. It definitely is horrific. Abomination of Llanowar's power and toughness are each equal to the number of elves you control, plus the number of elf cards in your graveyard. So this is interesting. This is a full-on elf tribal deck.
Yep.
I think a lot of people are excited because of the fact that it says elf cards in your graveyard, and that actually makes a difference because there are cards like Eye Blight's Ending. That's a tribal instant that says tribal instant elf. So Abomination will actually count that in the graveyard towards its power and toughness. It's not that exciting otherwise, but in the black-green world, you have Nath of the Guilt Leaf, which is all about discarding cards.
It's really a discard deck. It just happens to make elves, yeah.
Yeah, but this is an elf tribal commander if you want to just make your commander huge. It's got Vigilance and Menace. Menace, it's hard to block. It will do a lot of damage. I don't think it's actually that exciting to me personally.
No, I don't think it's that good, but as far as because there's a lot of black elves.
Yes.
And they haven't really had much of a home because they actually don't go in Nath or Gerard usually because that's not what those decks don't actually care about the number of elves you have. At least this is a deck finally where all the Shaman of the Pack and other cards that have black in them and also care about elves can kind of finally do some interaction with the commander that matters.
Feel good about yourself finally.
Yeah. I don't think it's going to be amazing or anything, but at least it's kind of it's kind of the best Golgari elf tribal commander, right? Just by default.
Yeah, I would argue that you'd actually want to put this into a Kethis the Hidden Hand deck because Kethis is also an elf and it has an additional color of white in it, and it would be a legendary elf spells matters deck. And there are a lot of legendary elves out there, a lot of things that do good things, and just elf tribal, elf ball, whatever you want to call it. Pretty powerful. I think this is nice. It fits right into that sort of like that flying commander. It's all about flying stuff. This is just about making a bunch of elves, and you can make it pretty powerful because there are competitive decks in the legacy world that are elves, or you can just make
just mono
casual.
Green elves is amazing. So.
Yeah, or you can just play a bunch of elves and have a lot of fun and hopefully swing with this absolutely horrific looking elf.
All right, the next one is the rare in Golgari, and this is another deck that we built and play tested. In fact, it was Murph who built this deck again 2 years ago. We've updated since.
Yeah.
And Murph is going to be playing this deck in extra turns coming up.
Ooh.
It's Belbe Corrupted Observer. It's a green and a black for a 2/2 legendary zombie elf. It says at the beginning of each player's post-combat main phase, that player adds 2 colorless mana, diamond mana, for each of your opponents who lost life this turn. So if you're in a 4-player game, and after your combat's over, each of your opponents has taken at least 1 damage, you will get 6 colorless mana into your mana pool.
Whoa.
Now, this says at the beginning of each player's post-combat main phase. That means it works for your opponents. However, your opponents have a lot harder time getting all 6 because if they damage you, they don't get mana for that.
Right, it's each of your opponents.
Yeah.
So they can get up to 4 typically.
However, and we've seen similar things on game nights before,
Yeah.
if your opponent damages themselves, they are your opponent, so they will get mana for that. So a shock land, a fetch land,
Ancient Tomb.
yeah, will give them 2 extra mana in their post-combat main phase, even if they don't deal any damage attacking.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting. It creates an interesting dynamic. Usually the Belbe deck is getting a lot more mana than most of the other decks. Most decks aren't set up to just deal damage to all opponents. And that's really what a Belbe deck we've learned wants to do, is just little bits of damage to all your opponents or all players.
Yeah, and ideally not through combat, even though this is triggering post-combat. So there are a lot of ways to do that, and then you just ramp a bunch. Pretty exciting.
Yeah, what you do is you play some little effect that deals 1 damage to each opponent or 1 damage to all players, and that effectively gives you 6 mana.
Yeah.
And then you play something crazy.
Yeah, Belbe would be way worse if it said at the beginning of each player's post-combat main phase, that player adds for blah, 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 for each opponents that were dealt damage this turn. But this is lost life, and damage can cause loss of life, but you can also do a lot of other cool effects.
So a really good card in the deck is or a really good mechanic is Extort. because anytime you cast a spell, you can pay either a white or a red, and if you do... Or white or a black, sorry. And if you do, each opponent loses 1 life, and you gain that much life. There's confusion about this card because...
All the time.
All the time. Extort is legal in mono white or mono black decks because the hybrid mana symbol that is on the extort cards is a reminder text and not rules text. If you don't believe us, go look it up before you get in the comments and tell us we're wrong. This is absolutely the way it works, trust me. But extort can go in the Belbe deck even though there's no white in it. And it becomes very, very good because anytime you cast a spell, you just pay that 1 extra black mana, and it's going to effectively that 1 black mana will give you 6 colorless mana in your second main phase. So Cryptghast is a really good one because it's also going to double the mana on all your swamps.
Yeah, that might be one of the best cards in the deck, actually.
Yeah, it probably is.
This is a land I didn't know existed. It's Leech-ridden Swamp. It is a land with a swamp subtype, and you can tap it to add black to your mana pool. Enters the battlefield tapped. However, you can pay a black and tap the land, and each opponent loses 1 life. Play this ability only if you control 2 or more black permanents, which doesn't seem too hard in a black-green deck, but it will ping everyone for 1, and then you, boom, get 6 colorless mana at your second post-combat main phase.
Yeah, so this land and another land basically produce 6 mana,
yeah,
which is pretty nuts. We don't like 3 CMC rocks. We mentioned that recently. A lot of you still love Chromatic Lantern for some reason. That's just bewildering to me. But however, in this deck, there's a 3 CMC rock I think we would play, and it is Cryptolith Fragment. 3 mana for an artifact. It enters the battlefield tapped, but you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, and then each player loses 1 life. So this effectively gives you 7 mana when you tap it. It's spread out a little bit. Right?
1 in 6, yeah. But you can also do this in other players' turns, and then they'll get that mana as well. So this could be a political card, too.
Interesting. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, if each player has 10 or less life, you transform the Cryptolith Fragment, and it becomes the Aura of Emrakul, which is also good with Belbe. It's a 1/4 flying death touch, but whenever it attacks, each opponent loses 3 life.
Hey!
So it still does the thing for you.
Yep. There's a great card called Pestilence.
Great card.
2 black. At the end of your turn, if there are no creatures in play, you sacrifice it. However, you can just pay 1 black mana to deal 1 damage to each creature and player. So this is similar to Leech-ridden Swamp. However, this can also hit creatures, and the idea is that if you use it too many times, it kills all the creatures and it sacrifices itself. But you only need to pay 1 black into this to get 6 mana. Seems good to me.
And that's a really good one also on opponent's turn. So you're like, I could give you a little extra mana if you need it. What are you going to do with that mana?
Yeah. And anyone that has 1/1s in their deck just hates Pestilence. Just hates
Token decks hate it.
Yeah.
Triskaidekaphobia is 3 and a black for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you choose 1. Each player with exactly 13 life loses the game. Then each player gains 1 life. Or each player with exactly 13 life loses the game. Then each player loses 1 life. You're going to have everybody lose 1 life so you can get the extra mana.
Yep. Card that we talked about quite a bit.
This card's so good in the deck.
It's just always good now.
Yeah.
It's Deathrite Shaman, black and green. If you're playing Golgari and not running this, you should reconsider. You can tap it to exile a land from a graveyard and you add a mana, or you can tap a black and tap it to exile an instant or a sorcery from a graveyard and each opponent loses 2 life, thus triggering Belbe. Or you can tap a green and exile a creature card from a graveyard and you gain 2 life. So the first 2 are more of the relevant ones. You can get rid of people's fetch lands or whatever, and you can also get rid of people's instants and sorceries, maybe even response to a Snapcaster Mage, and then get a bunch of mana off it.
If your deck can run it, you should run it. It's a 1 mana planeswalker. It's graveyard hate. It's ramp. It deals damage against life. In this deck, it gives a ton of mana.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
Anytime anybody's got an instant or sorcery, that card's crazy. And then, so you get all this mana, and then you need cool stuff to do with the mana. And Murph pulled aside a couple of his favorites. One is In Garrick's Wake.
Yep, that'll do it.
This is 7 black for a sorcery. Destroy all creatures you don't control and all planeswalkers you don't control. Normally prohibitive cost, right? 9 CMC. But often the turn after you play Belbe, like turn 3, you could cast this because you really just need 1 black because Belbe's going to provide the other 6
mana. Oh my gosh, that's true. You just need murder mana.
Yeah. So there's definitely been games where he casts In Garrick's Wake on like turn 4. And it's just like, if you have a good setup or everybody's commander's out or something.
Yeah, that's brutal.
Yeah, so
that is very, cool. Very brutal.
And then Wormcoil Engine is great because it's exactly 6 generic mana. You can cast it with the 6 colorless mana. It's a 6/6 with Death Touch and Lifelink, but when it dies, you put a 3/3 artifact worm creature with Death Touch and a 3/3 with Lifelink onto the battlefield. So it dies into 2 3/3s. This is just a house of a card because, again, often when you play against this deck, this card comes out on turn 3 or 4.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, turn 2 playing Belbe is really important. Turn 3, you're able to do something and boom, get 6 mana, as well as 3 additional lands that you're probably, or 4 lands. 3 lands, I guess.
You're in green. You're going to have extra ramp. A lot of times Belbe's played maybe on turn 3, and then on turn 4, you have like 5 or 6 mana. You do a little thing that deals damage to everybody, get 6 mana from that, and then go boom, make a 7 or 8, 9 mana play.
Arguably, Belbe could also do this on turn 3. You play Belbe, do something with that 1 extra black mana, and then cast a Wormcoil Engine,
Yeah, so it's pretty explosive. You can get like Eldrazi out pretty fast too. That's not how Murph plays, but I was like, do you have Kozilek in the deck? And I don't think he does, but I think you should put it in there if you're playing it.
Yeah, and if you need to change the mana to different colors, Prismite, 2 mana, you can pay 2 to add 1 mana of any color. There's also Helix Pinnacle, which is a very silly card in green, where you get to put tower counters on it for X mana, and then if you have 100 or more tower counters at the beginning of your upkeep, you win the game.
So you can start saving up the mana?
Yeah, save up that mana. I don't think that's the casual way to take Belbe.
There's a gemstone array. There's ways to filter the colorless mana into colored, but I think in general you don't need that. You can just build your deck with all the cool stuff you want to cast being mostly colorless mana.
Totally.
This deck is way more powerful than it looks. Like every time Murph plays it, it's like that deck does work. It's very good.
Yeah, it ramps up very quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, well, now let's move on to the final 2 cards of this first part of this Solo Legends set review. These are also 2 of the 3 color cards in Jund and Sultai that both have black and green in them. So, first up, let's go to Yurlok of Scorch Thrash. Almost thought I said trash at first. It's 1 in Jund, so black, green, and red for 4 mana total for a 4/4 legendary creature Viashino Shaman with Vigilance. A player losing unspent mana causes that player to lose that much life. And you can pay 1 mana and tap it to have each player add black, red, green. So
Mana Burn's back.
Mana Burn is back, and you can give people mana at instant speed by paying 1 mana and tapping the Yurlok to add 3 mana to every single player. So you actually get 2 mana out of that transaction.
Everyone else gets 3.
Everyone else gets 3, and then as soon as you move to the next phase, boom, they all take that much damage.
And you too, because it's a player losing unspent mana causes that player to lose that much life. So it's not like only your opponents have Mana Burn. Everybody's got Mana Burn.
Yes.
So it's a pretty interesting and fun deck. Just because you're going to try and win in a really weird way, which is giving people too much mana, right?
Yeah. But there are fortunately lots of different ways to go immediately infinite. So Umbral Mantle is a card that you can pay 3 to untap the card, and then you can put a card like Leyline of Abundance out there, which gives you an extra mana. So every single time you'll have enough mana to pay 1 into this, get 3 mana, and that's going to give you 4, and then you pay 3 to untap it, and then you have an extra mana to tap it again. So you can just give everyone infinite mana and then pass the phase. Just kill them immediately.
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of cards that fit into what is a 2-step process, right? You use a card that can untap Yurlok. Mm-hmm. So there's a bunch of cards you can do it. Umbral Mantle, Sword of Perons, Staff of Domination. Now, they were smart, and I think they knew about this, and they required mana to tap Yurlok so that you're going to need 1 additional step. Otherwise, Umbral Mantle would just immediately go infinite, right? With the tap, untap, or whatever.
3 mana untap, 3 mana untap.
And then, so what you need to do is add a card that's going to increase the amount of mana that Yurlok produces. And like you said, Leyline of Abundance does it, Mana Reflection does it, Nyxbloom Ancient does it. There's a bunch of cards that'll do that, right?
Yeah.
And then when Yurlok's creating enough mana to use those other cards to infinitely untap itself, you're spending all the mana to untap Yurlok, but your opponents aren't spending that mana.
Yeah.
They're just accumulating a ton of it, unless they have a Staff of Domination or something out, which they probably don't. You have to be a little careful because they could use that mana maybe to try and kill you in that moment. But, if it's during combat or during an end step and it's during your turn, there's just a low chance that, that's really going to hurt you. And then, that will just win the game when you pass or when you change phases.
Pray that your opponent doesn't have like a Comet Storm or an instant speed spell they can dump mana into. There's a lot of really cool cards, though, I think that work with this deck because you don't need to use Yurlok's ability for it to affect other players. There are cards like War's Toll, which is 3 and red for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent taps a land for mana, tap all lands that player controls. And if the creature an opponent controls attacks, all creature that opponent controls attacks if able. So you don't so let's say I'm the opponent of Yurlok. I tap 1 land. War's Toll says, well, if you don't tap all of your lands right now, or you have to tap all your lands right now, but you won't get mana for them. So in response, I could be like, fine, I'll float this mana and use it But no matter what, you're taxing people's mana. And so it gives them less option, I think. Either they pay mana and potentially lose some, or Yurlok just is like setting this kind of like boundary on them to be like, you can't use your mana the way you want to. I kind of control the pace there.
Well, Yurlok gives 3 colors of mana, black, red, and green. Mm-hmm. It does not give white or blue. So if you, on their turn, they want to do anything, and that just means white and blue spells will just not be cast during the other turns when you're giving them mana.
Because War's Toll is shut down the rest of their lands.
Right, exactly. Well, they could have mana rocks and things like that, but it's just harder. So what you're doing is saying anytime you want to use some of your mana, you have to use all of it. And now when I'm giving you mana later, that makes that a lot less dangerous because you don't have as many options because you can only use these 3 colors. Right. So I think War's Toll works really well in that instance. There's also Mana Web, which is 3 mana for an artifact. Whenever a land an opponent controls it, is tap for mana, tap all lands that player controls that could produce any type of mana that land could produce. So if they tap an island, they have to tap anything they can tap for blue.
Yeah. Price of Glory is my least favorite card. 2 and red for an enchantment. Whenever a player taps a land for mana, if it's not that player's turn, destroy that land. So now, you may give them 3 mana and they're like, cool, I want to do something for 6, but darn, Price of Glory is out. I actually don't want to do that.
Yep. Conqueror's Flail is another one. It's 2 mana for an artifact. Equipment, 2 to equip. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each color among permanents you control. It doesn't matter too much. But then it says, as long as Conqueror's Flail is attached to a creature, your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. So this is Grand Abolisher, basically, but outside of white. So that means on your turn, you're pretty safe to give them a ton of mana because they can't cast spells.
Yep.
So they could activate abilities and stuff, but you can usually see those coming. So that's when you'll feel really safe to be like, okay, now I'm going to give everybody somehow, maybe not infinite, maybe just like 15 mana and do 15 to everybody. That's still pretty good.
Yeah, the only thing you don't want to do is a Crufix player, which doesn't lose unspent mana between turns and phases, so they're just collecting the mana.
Yep.
But if you do see that your opponents have a lot of artifacts with activated abilities, they can pump the mana into somewhere else. You have a lot of options in these colors to stop them. You have Collector Ufi, you have Cursed Totem, which are basically saying activated abilities of artifacts or creatures can't be activated. Now, Cursed Totem, a little worse against Yurlok because it affects yourself.
Yeah, and also since a lot of your combo pieces are like Umbral Mantle, I don't know if you want to do the artifacts one either. But
you also have cards like Magus of the Vineyard, which is cards that add mana to people's mana pool. So at the beginning of each player's main pre-combat main phase, you can add green to their mana pool. So which is kind of interesting if they can't use the green mana. Most times they will. But there's a lot of interesting things you can do where you just kind of give people mana. There's like this weird game you can maybe play where it's like, I do want my opponents to have more mana until the turn that I start killing them with it.
Yeah, you can make deals like, hey, I could give you 4 mana right now. If I do that, what will you do for me? Will you destroy this thing or not attack me or whatever? And then you're just kind of biding your time, keeping everybody at bay with your politics until you finally go, okay, now I'm going to use my Umbral Mantle and kill everybody or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's Overabundance, which is kind of funny. It's 1 red and a green for an enchantment. Whenever a player taps a land for mana, that player adds 1 additional mana to their mana pool of the same type, and then Overabundance deals the damage to them. So it's like, hey, everyone, get more mana, but start doing the thing that my deck wants you to do, which is like slowly ping yourself down. And then if you're in this deck, you play Leyline Tyrant and you play Omnath, Locus of Mana, because both of those will stop red and green mana from disappearing from your mana pools as steps and phases ends. And so you
hold all the extra
you collect your extra mana, yeah. Because I could see someone being like, I don't want to play a 2-card infinite combo with Yurlok. That's boring. I'd rather do something a little more interactive. And so I think you can kind of do that world there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, seems cool. I definitely like pretty fragile, so I don't think it's going to be like crazy powerful, but it could be fun.
Definitely a fun card. Again, this is like just new design space, and I've never seen a Jund deck do this.
Yeah, exactly. The fact that they were like, we should have a card that brings mana burn back is pretty funny.
Yeah.
I like that. All right, we're down to our last card for this video. It's Arcalos Lagoon Mystic. 1 and Sultai, so 1 black, green, blue, 4 mana for a 2/4 legendary turtle shaman.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, but this guy looks
Am I not
older.
turtly enough for the Turtle Club? As long as Arcalos is tapped, other permanents enter the battlefield tapped. All of them. Your opponent's yours.
Permanents.
As long as Arcalos is untapped, other permanents enter the battlefield untapped. So obviously, on your turn, Arcalos is going to be untapped because, you untap it at the beginning of your untap step, and you're going to want to do most things, and then somehow tap Arcalos so that on everyone else's turn, their permanents, that's basic lands and everything, enter the battlefield tapped. I think getting Arcalos tapped is the most important part of this equation because untapping is going to happen naturally on your untap step. But you're not always going to be able to attack. It's a 2/4.
And we saw with Calamax, that can more reliably attack because it's a 4/4 that grows. Arcalos, you just want to use tap abilities. And fortunately, there are a lot in these colors, right, Josh?
Yeah. Fate Stitcher, one of my favorites. I like this one a lot because it can untap Arcalos.
Or tap
it. So you really have a lot of control over Arcalos in this. You can make a deal like, oh, I don't want Jimmy to get it, but like it goes to Megan's turn, and I'm like, hey, if I let your permanents come into play untapped, will you, help me out here? And then you can't choose to do that unless you have a card like Fate Stitcher, right?
And a lot of times too, if one player is going off and Arcalos is there, and you're like, well, I'm going to tap him and make you suffer. Everyone else, it's like, well, we could have helped if we could get the lands I'm playing this turn come into play untapped. And you're like, shoot, okay, you're right.
Yeah, so Springleaf Drum, Honor Worn Shaku, those are ways to tap Arcalos for mana. Lotus. Oh, now we'll talk about the cards that are good if they come into play untapped. So Bounce Lands.
Bounce lands are amazing.
Really, really good if they come into play untapped because you still tap the land that you're going to bounce, then you play the bounce land, and you basically get 1 extra mana for that turn because it'll come into play untapped. So yeah, you're going to play all the bounce lands you can.
Yeah, there's crazy lands like Lotus Field that enters the battlefield tapped. However, you have to sack 2 lands when it comes into play, but you add 3 mana of any one color. So this way, you're not wasting a land drop having to wait a whole turn cycle that's coming into play untapped.
And again, you tap the lands you're going to sack to it, so you effectively get 2 extra mana from Lotus Field. Worn Power Stone is a card that's like pretty awesome if it comes into play untapped, right?
Yeah, 3 mana 2 for 2. That's pretty good. Yeah, so I think Arcalos has definitely got a lot of value stapled all over it. And then if you wanted to go a little harder with it, you could play the stacks route.
I'm afraid this is the version that is going to be known for Arcalos because it does like... It doesn't take a lot of imagination to like, of course, the first thing you think of when you see this is you should play it with all the stacks pieces. And I think that's probably... So we're going to see Arcalos in the command zone, or when we do, it's going to be one of those, oh boy.
Is it a stacks deck? And they're like, no, it's a turtle tribal deck. And you're like, I
don't know if I believe you. And then they're going to go turn 2 Winter Orb, and you're going to be like, wait, you said, well, turtles like winter.
Yeah, exactly. The Arcalos is hibernating right now. This is the Vorthos aspect of the deck. Winter Orb too, because as long as it's untapped, then players can't untap more than 1 land during their untapped steps. So if you have tapping abilities like a Fate Stitcher, tap the Winter Orb before, and then boom, you untap all your things. And you can make it so that you're the only person not affected by Winter Orb.
One of the few ways to get out of a Winter Orb is to like play a land, wait a turn, play a land, and slowly get to the point where you're like, Reclamation Sage, kill the Winter Orb.
Yeah.
Now we can breathe.
Just took me 2.5 turns.
But if every land you play comes into play tapped, you're not...
yeah.
You're not making any progress, really.
Wow, you're doubly slowing them down.
Yeah, Stasis is another one. Players have to skip their untapped steps, so...
That's not nice.
Yeah, that's a little brutal and tougher to work around. You'll need some stuff because Arcalos won't untap then.
Yeah.
But, obviously... stacks find a way around the stasis thing. There's a million ways.
Would you build this in the stacksy way, Josh?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think there's a lot of fun to be had here with it could be a very political, group huggy type deck too, just to, always control people's untap steps. I could see people getting a little sick and tired of that pretty quickly though.
I think just taking advantage of the fact that this card allows you to play a bunch of stuff that would otherwise be bad.
Yeah, the slow fetches, the lifelands.
Yeah, exactly. Like, think of people that are always complaining that, the mana bases for some of these decks are so expensive, which, by the way, they're not. Like, we've played against people like Mitch, and he'll play 5 colors with a lot of basics, do just fine. You can play what you want. But if your guild gates are basically dual lands, because they come into play untapped because of your commander.
Your life lands are dual lands.
Yeah. And not just lands, any card that is balanced. Yeah. They balance cards, right? They design it and then they go, okay, well, this is powerful. How do we make it so that it's going to make sense for the game? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, one of the ways they kind of put a check and balance on cards is be like, okay, well, let's have it enter the battlefield tapped. This gets around that. So there's a bunch of cards I'm sure out there that we didn't even think of that are really good with Arcalos. So I don't think you have to go the stacks route. I just hope it doesn't get the reputation for being a stacks deck, because it won't matter then what cool thing you did. Everyone will make the assumption, right?
Well, this is a great way to play these Sultai colors with a budget mana base and just be pretty reliant that you're never gonna have to worry too much about it. If you
slow fetches, guild gates, life lands.
Just literally go to Gatherer and look up enters the battlefield tapped or enter the battlefield tapped, and then put those colors in there. there and see what comes up.
Yeah, going to be a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah.
All right, that's going to end part 1 of our solo commanders for Commander Legends. Part 2 will be coming out next week, I'm sure.
There's so many cards to talk about.
Then we're going to do the partners, and then in the 99, and maybe talk about drafting a video. So we got a lot left. Just hit the subscribe button and stay tuned, because there's going to be a lot of content in the next couple of weeks. To the listeners, what do you think of our first batch of cards from Commander Legends? There's obviously plenty more to go, so let us know if you found a combo or interaction among these that we missed.
Yeah, or you think it's cool, or maybe, why would you ever build it like that, Jimmy and Josh? Why don't you do X, Y, and Z instead? Let us know.
Just let Jimmy know about that last one. I don't need to know. I'm cool. I'm straight. I'm good.
Well, no matter how you do it with a smile on your face.
Just put a smile emoji at the end and everything's fine.
Or an exclamation point that like dissolves all aggression. It's pretty funny. Okay, and of course, we mentioned a lot of cards today, a lot of combos, a lot of really interesting things. Hopefully your brewing minds are going, and you're going to want to brew some decks around this. And if you want to pick up any of those cards that you need for these decks, tune them up, or just to buy some Commander Legends packs, singles, sealed product, what have you, cardkingdom.com/command zone. That's the affiliate link. It's as simple as typing it into your browser, and boom, you have access to almost every single card in the history of Magic the Gathering. Any commander deck you want to build. Plus, Card Kingdom does awesome things. They'll have these like pre-built decks. If you're trying to teach someone new, it's an amazing way to go. You just buy these decks that are more built to sort of be like a balanced experience against each other, and boom, you're off to the races. So there's tons of options, tons of ways to play Magic, not just Commander. If you're learning to teach someone new over the holiday season, cardkingdom.com/command zone.
Yeah, but who are we kidding? You're going to buy Commander Legends. Like, everyone's buying Commander Legends. That's what I'm doing. Just buy cardkingdom.com/command zone, and you're getting the cards you want, helping us out. And then once you get those cards, you really do want to keep them safe and secure in mint condition. And the best way to do that is to put them into Pro Gloss Ultra Pro Eclipse sleeves, or actually any Ultra Pro sleeve uses the Eclipse technology now. They call it Chroma Fusion, I think.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep calling it Eclipse technology. But whatever it is, it makes the sleeves nearly indestructible. We have had our decks sleeved in these Eclipse type sleeves for years and years now. I haven't switched a single deck out of Eclipse sleeves because of any problem with the sleeves. I did switch a couple because they came out with Pro Gloss and I wanted to do that.
Right.
But I haven't had it. I've had a same draft set for pre-releases and stuff. Obviously, we haven't gotten to pre-releases in like 6 months, so that might have something to do with it. But for like a few years now, because the sleeves just last.
Yeah, and not to mention they have all the art sleeves. Like they had all of the guild ones, and those are built with the Chroma Fusion technology, and they shuffle great. A lot of times, you know, if you want to get a sleeve with art in it, you run the risk of scuffing it up or it not being
peeling
smooth.
off.
Yeah, and Ultra Pro, again, they've been doing this for so long that they've really mastered how to make those art sleeves, and those are great as well. So if you want to, you know, suit up your deck with some style, or just go for the Eclipse Pro Gloss, whatever you want and need to do, Ultra Pro's got you covered.
All right, now it's time for the end step, which snuck up on us.
It did.
Where we talk about something cool outside the world of Magic. Oh, you wrote something in here.
I do. I got this one.
Sweet.
So it's a brand new movie on Netflix to celebrate. It's kind of like I would call it a mix between Inside Out, that was the one about the emotions, and Zootopia. Sure. And then one of the oldest Chinese folk tales about the moon, about Chang'e, which is some people that play Mobile Legends will have seen this character Chang'e, like riding around the little moon, and her lover Houyi. And it's about this little kid that dreams of going to the moon. And it's an animated movie that's a musical, and it has elements of those first movies I've talked about. It's really beautiful. It's based on a really, really old folk tale. If you enjoy animated movies, if you're looking for something really easy and safe to watch with your family as well, this movie is definitely recommended. It's on Netflix right now. It's beautiful.
Can I eat mooncake while I watch it?
You can. In fact, the movie has mooncakes throughout the entire darn thing. It's
then I'm
a major part of the story because the Mid-Autumn Festival is all about eating these delicious 1,000-calorie mooncakes.
They are a bajillion calories, but they're really, really good. As anything with that many calories is usually good, actually.
Yeah, jam-packed. You could eat that and like literally eat nothing else for the whole day. Like if I ever had, it's like lembas bread, right?
Yeah.
It's a mooncake.
All right, Over the Moon on Netflix. Big thanks to our editing, graphics, and logistics team, which is Ashlyn Rose, Craig Blanchett, Lady Danger, Manson Lung, Justin Masseth, Jake Boss, Josh Murphy, Alfred Estaka, Patrick Nahn, and Sam Waldo.
Big team. Thanks all. And of course, big thanks to Jeffrey Palmer. He does the Living Cards animations that often live behind us on set that definitely start our show. And you can always find Jeffrey online at Living Cards MTG.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Oof, we got more to go. Stay tuned. Plenty more set reviews.
Yeah, we'll see you very, very soon.
Very soon.
Peace.
For further inquiries, send an email to commandcast@rocketjump.com or ask us on Twitter @JFWong and @JoshLeeQuai. See you later, alligator.
Greetings, humans.